could see the people in the window too. Thank you all so much for being here. We're going to reconvene our work session from earlier today. It is a little after 2 o'clock. I'm going to turn it over to Tim. Tim Jackson, did you have some comments before we get started this afternoon? We've realigned the agenda a little bit, I think.
Yeah, we're going to start the meeting in the afternoon with the Supervisor of Elections. And I did make a comment to you earlier that when we get to the other court support departments, I'll have a few words to say before each of the presentations.
Fantastic. Want to welcome our Supervisor of Elections. You were not here earlier today when I opened it up and made the comment. Before each person presents, if you would please share with us your name and the position that you have. The folks who are watching at home don't have the benefit of seeing a card in front of you with your name and your title, so that was pointed out to us earlier that would be a benefit to the public. So we do have a hard stop this afternoon at 4 o'clock. We have commissioners that have places that they need to go, so hopefully we'll be able to be mindful of the time and get through all of the good information that we have to share today. All right. Mr. Anderson.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, Commissioners. My name is Chris Anderson, Seminole County Supervisor of Elections. I'm going to let you introduce yourself.
Bobby Kidd, Deputy Chief Administrator for Supervisor of Elections.
Right, so today we're here to talk about the SOE budget, and we're going to talk about, I'm going to frame this a different way because this is a new way that we are submitting our budgets to the County Commission, and I want to be able to explain it properly. The Supervisor of Elections has reoccurring costs and non-reoccurring costs. And we have our core costs, which are reoccurring, and our election-related costs. That's what causes those sharp variances up and the sharp variances down in non-election years. So you're going to hear me refer to those terms as we go through our presentation. So our mission statement is to ensure your choice counts. That's what we do. Everything from the money that we spend, that are tax dollars, in great partnership with the Board of County Commission, is to ensure that every voter's choice counts. We have 346,377 registered voters and counting. That is a moving target each and every day, every hour, and every second. And we conduct fair, honest, and secure elections. We want to make sure our elections are safe, and being properly funded is one of the ways we ensure that that happens. We always adhere to all federal, state, and local laws as we conduct our mission. So this slide gives you an idea of our budget and the positions, what our staffing table is. We currently have 20 positions that are filled, and we have 23 positions that we are budgeted for. We're not asking for any increase in full-time positions at this time. We have, let's talk about the variances in the increase at 25%. What makes that up? Well, remember, in a presidential election year, you're going to have the presidential preference will occur in March. You're also going to have the primary, the Florida primary, that will occur in August. Now, you have the general election that occurs in November. That's actually going to be in fiscal year 25. However, the way I always explain it is you have to purchase the supplies for the party prior to. And those supplies are going to be your vote by mail, which is one of the most expensive pieces of elections non-occurring costs that we occur at the office. It's a tune of about $800,000. It's very expensive to mail out to voters, but these are costs that we will occur in fiscal year 2023, 2024 that you will not occur in 2025. So that's the good news. You won't have to worry about it next year, but this year we will have to pay for those supplies for the general election in this fiscal year. So it's about 2.5 elections that this budget will pay for. You have your early voting. Early voting, you have 7 sites for the primaries, 8 sites for the general. you have several positions or time slots that have to be filled. For early voting, you're talking about 3,300 time slots. Election day is about 1,500 time slots. So imagine we are 20 employees right now. As we go into an election year, we're going to double our staff with seasonal workers at about 20 staff members. The benefit of that is with these seasonal workers that we don't have to pay FRS contributions, which we know has increased. We don't have to pay health insurance to these folks. These folks come in, they give us our time, they agree to a wage, and we pay them. So we ramp up when we need them, and we cut them loose when after the election. That is another non-reoccurring charge, right? That's something that will occur in this fiscal year we're talking about that will not occur in the 2025 fiscal year. So again, as I spoke about what these costs are going to be directly related to the election, your preference, your primary, and your general with that mailing of vote by mail. It has to go out 45 days prior to the election. That puts us in September, which is actually in this fiscal. We have to design the ballot once it's approved from the Department of State, and then we have to pay our vendor who prepares these ballots to be mailed out to our voters, and that has to be done in this fiscal year. So this illustrates the cost breakdown. So the dark blue is our core cost. We had a 1.69% in our core cost. That's our reoccurring cost every year. This is what you're going to see every year in our budget. This is the difference. I have not, in the 4 years that I presented to this board, really broken it down this way before. So you can see that our core cost doesn't really increase that much. It's not until we get toward elections when we have that sharp increase, because we have those statutory requirements of providing early voting, election day activities, vote by mail activities, also countywide mailers that are required during that year that will occur in the election year that will not occur in the year after that. When you look at our election costs, which is in the light gray there, or light blue, that's going to be election-related costs. And it's expensive, but it's statutorily required. There's no wiggle room there. We have to do these mailings. We have to service these voters. And remember, our increase in our voters will be more than what we're talking about right now. We project that we'll be somewhere around 367,000 voters by the time the general election of 2024 rolls around. I made a prediction in 2019 that we'd be at about 335 prior to the 2020 election, and the book closing numbers for the 2020 general election was 335,000 voters. So let's talk about the core increases, our core costs. Couple areas. Number one, your FRS contributions. That went up, and I know that that's affected every budget on the county level. And for us, we're the smallest piece of the budget, so it doesn't have a great impact on us as it would other offices, but it still has a major impact to our budget, and it increased about 4.4% for us. Then you have healthcare increases. That also cost went up as well, about 4%. The next increase is we have decided that I believe it's in the best interest of the organization that we increase our base pay. We were at $12.65 an hour. Prior to me taking office, we hadn't increased that since the 90s. Quite frankly, we are required statutorily now to pay people certain wages as it increases throughout the years. We are currently at $15 an hour. We've done salary studies, SOE offices. We also reviewed the salary study that was done by the county itself. The job that we have, which is a voter services tech or clerk, the job that most mirrors that job here in the county services building is the building permit tech. That job right now sits at about $20 an hour. We're increasing our base pay to $17 an hour from $15. We also are going to adjust for inflation, or not, I'm sorry, not for inflation, but for compression in that 20 employees to properly bring them where they need to be as well. So that is what makes up that increase there. Our election-related costs are going to be what I just explained. The activities related to the election, the purchasing of ballot paper, the mailings, hiring of election workers. Let's talk about the staffing of it. So this slide gives you an idea of our staffing table in comparison to the voters that we're servicing. So as you can see, we maintained, and then there was an increase in 2019 when I came in, and we're holding steady at a staffing table of 23 for right now. I believe we can get through this at 20. We have some open positions that we hope to fill, but as you know, hiring is a bit of a struggle. Seasonal office staff. This is of a great benefit to the taxpayers of Seminole County because these individuals come into our office and they work a lot of hours. As you can see, the total hours worked. That's a lot of time that they put in, but the benefit is that we're not paying in FRS contributions and we're not paying in on benefits. These folks are working for an hourly rate to which they agree upon, and as you can see, we're almost doubling our full-time staff. They complement that and help us conduct the elections in that year. This is what I refer to as a non-reoccurring cost. We won't have to do this in the year prior, or the year after this, I'm sorry. Election workers. We have 3,300 positions that we are going to, or I would say time slots that we have to fill. 8 early voting sites in the general, 7 early voting sites in the primaries. You've got 8 days of early voting. It's going to be about a 10-hour day during early voting. It's going to be about a 14-hour day during the general election. These positions are paid positions. They range from $150 to $270 depending on the position in which the election worker is holding. We have to train these individuals. They have to be paid for their training, and then they have to be paid for their services. Now, the labor cost for the general election will occur in fiscal year 2025. So if you're trying to understand what will we be paying out of the 24 fiscal for the general election, it's going to be those vote by mail costs that will occur in this fiscal. The labor costs will occur in fiscal 2025. And this is what we will be paying. This is what we will be staffing for right now. And this shows, these are actual numbers. So as you can see, this is the August primary, 2022, 2021, 2022. Those are the numbers. This is what it was in November, and this is what's required. We are statutorily required to provide early voting, so we have to have these positions. Same with Election Day. We're statutorily required to provide Election Day voting. As you know, last year when we went through redistricting, we increased our polling places from 80 to 82. We have to have these election workers to assist with Election Day voting. You have 82 sites, and you have to have these positions filled in order to service these voters. This is a cost breakdown. When you look at our staffing, it's going to be about 1.4. Election worker costs, seasonal costs. The March presidential preference primary is going to be in this budget. The primary will be in this budget, all of those costs. So what I'm trying to do is give a better idea of the sheer magnitude of the work that is required going into a presidential election year that is a lot, it's expensive, but it's not reoccurring. So you're going to see a sharp decline, as always, in the next fiscal year. This isn't my slide, Tim. Is this something you wanted to speak to, or?
Yeah, this is a slide we provided for all the constitutional officers. It shows the history of the transfer, the general fund transfer to the agency.
Tim, we can't hardly hear you if you pull that mic up a bit.
This chart shows the history of general fund transfers to the supervisor of elections. It was provided for all the constitutional officers, and it shows the fiscal '24 increase of 25.9%.
And that concludes my presentation. You have any questions?
All right. Commissioners, any questions for the supervisor of elections? Commissioner Herr, then Commissioner Sembauer, then Commissioner Delory.
And over on this side, I'll be next.
You fall in line.
We'll start on page 95.
I'm not sure what page
We either
that
need
is.
taller seats or, so 95 is, here, I'll just ask the question. So pay increases overall, you sort of gave an idea of, you're moving up to $17.
Correct.
What's the overall increase that you're giving?
Overall increase, it's going to be about 80 grand, if I understand. Yeah, it's gonna be 80 grand.
Percentage, please.
Percentage-wise, it's going to be a small percentage because it's only over 20 people. I would have to get that information over to you. I can give you a percentage.
We definitely need that information.
Sure.
So we'd like to see it as a percentage of the payroll.
Okay.
And we'd like to see it broken out by what you're adjusting to adjust your baseline, and then any compression adjustments and overall. Thank you. And then on page 98, there is, this is the slide that talks about election worker staffing, early voting.
Okay.
And there's a reference to alternates, 8 per site, right above the total line there, and that's calculated into the total required. Do we pay alternates, or are they truly alternates?
So the alternates will be paid for training. They're not paid unless they work.
So they wouldn't be calculated into the overall. So in essence, there's, we'll call it 1,300, 1,288 in terms of total required. I'm not sure what that metric is. Is that an hour? 1,288
No,
hours?
so these are time slots, but we have to budget because if an election worker, which we get that, we get election workers that call out or emergencies happen, we have to then call them to send them to the different locations.
And they get paid if
They
they
get
cover
paid.
for the person who isn't working, who
That is
isn't
correct.
getting paid.
That is
Therefore,
correct.
you're not double paying.
Right.
So the 1,288, from my perspective, is a double count. It's a representation that it's much larger than it is.
Sure, absolutely.
So the alternate.
You have to pull the mic up.
I'm sorry.
And if you would
The-
just remind us your name and your title for the,
Bobby Kidd, Deputy Chief Administrator, Supervisor of Elections. The alternate receives a $25 payment for their training and being on standby from 6 o'clock in the morning until 9 o'clock. And then after that, they're free, but they receive $25.
Okay, so,
And-
but the rest of these are getting paid for presumably a 10-hour day, I think is what I heard, at $15 an hour, whatever the, what
Well,
is
no,
the
it's
number?
going to be a set rate, but it depends on their position.
$250 a day was the number that you threw out there, so it's either $250 or $25, but they're all represented and added into the 3360, which sort of leads us to believe that it is a much bigger payroll than it is, because and I appreciate that you have to have alternates, you absolutely have to have alternates, and they get paid the $25, but from a numbers representation point of view, it's the total of it without the 1,288, which is roughly 2,100, is what we're looking at in terms of the slots, time slots. And what is a time slot? Is that a day?
It could be a day. It has to be a day because once an election worker enters the polling place, they can't leave. So it is a day.
So it's roughly 2,500, 2,100, my own rough math, 2,100 times $250 plus the 25 for the 1,288. That's how I would value this page. Is that a fair representation?
That's on the high side, because 250 is the high number.
That's the high number.
Thank you. So what's the average number?
I don't know what the average is, but it ranges from 250 down to 130 for a
So what would
deputy.
be really helpful on this page, given that we're in a budgeting process, would be to understand what the financial calculation is for this page.
Cool. We can do that.
So if you wanted to look at early voting, that's the number.
Yeah, we can definitely get that to you, Commissioner.
And then just to give you the thought process that's happening here, is that I'm going to take that and try to correlate that back to the other graphs and tie it back to the actual budget submission.
Gotcha.
Which, accounting is about tying the numbers all together. So that's my attempt here.
Understood.
Can we talk about mailings? So you
Sure.
referenced in the beginning of it, but I didn't see the number on the page. This was something that was auditory. So it was roughly $208,000 to buy the material necessary to do the mailings. This was on the third page of your presentation. And so define what the 208 pays for, then talk to us about postage, outgoing, and postage coming back. Are you putting postage on the return, or are you letting the citizen that's voting do that?
I am not. So we took a look at paid postage, and it'll be about $100,000 to $150,000 increase. This office is in a state of influx. We're going from a small to medium county posture to a large county posture. I mean, we're almost at 400,000 voters, give or take. So when you look at it, we have to start looking at using tax dollars to start purchasing more voting equipment to be able to service more voters, and I think those dollars can go somewhere else that's more beneficial. So I decided to take that out of this year's budget because it's quite expensive. Another reason why is because since 2019, we have seen a 32% increase in postal costs. It has increased significantly. It is at 63 cents right now. It will go up to 66 cents in July, and it's probably going to go up again before next year. So we're going to continuously chase that dollar or that cost. When I talk to voters, they prefer to bring it to us, and they also prefer to use those secure ballot intake stations that are conveniently located around the county. I'll also tell you another plus that I think the board will really appreciate. The plans of moving the Supervisor of Elections office to 5 Points brings us more south, right, which is going to make it much more convenient for voters to come and vote in a more centrally located area within the county. Number one, you have the students that are over at Seminole State. They're within walking distance to come over and vote, or if they choose to turn in vote by mail ballots. So I think that once we looked at it, which I said I would do, I wanted to make sure that you all were involved in that process to see, to know that that is something to anticipate. But after looking at the numbers and me being as conservative as I am, I looked at it and said it's not of a great benefit to the voters, so we're going to pass on that this time.
Appreciate that. Guarding the taxpayer dollar. Is the secure drop box manned?
Yes, it is. That's required by law.
Thank you. And then last, this is the only submission that we have that doesn't have a line item actual budget submitted with it. So I would like to see that. I have a presentation, but
We submitted that,
May 1st.
May 1st that was submitted.
so for the public meeting, we probably need to have that as part of the documents. I realize it's been emailed.
Yeah. Yeah, we did receive a budget by account line, so we can submit that to the commissioners.
The budget that was submitted by account line, I appreciate the way you did this to talk about recurring and non-reoccurring cost. The non-reoccurring costs do reoccur. They just reoccur at a weird cycle, right? They reoccur every 4 years, or they reoccur in the other 4 years, right? Presidential, non-presidential. It would be extremely helpful, and I think we talked about this last year, to have the non-presidential election years lined up and the presidential election years lined up so that we can see what that escalation curve is on like election years. And then the off-cycle year would be an off-cycle year. I think that would be a really good step toward full transparency in terms of what the budget's doing. I think it's
Absolutely.
going to have a good story to tell.
Absolutely.
But from this, it's hard to see that, so that's why I'm asking for it.
Absolutely. We will definitely provide that to you.
Thank you. That's it, thank you.
Commissioner Zenda.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
My first question is on the 3 FTEs that you indicated weren't filled. Talk to me about the funding for those 3 positions as far as carrying those forward. What was that money actually utilized for, if it was?
It's still, the funding is still there for the positions, and we've been actively trying to fill them, but, it's very hard to hire in this day and age. We have 2 voter services clerk positions that are open. We also have a election worker management position. The reason why we couldn't fill the election worker management position is because we have gone after a new election worker management system. So now that before we could bring someone in, we had to first get a system that they could utilize to work with. So now that we are at that point, we're actually getting ready to start hiring for that position now that we have obtained a new election worker management system so that we can go ahead and hire. My policy is in the office is that when we're in an off election year such as this, that by October 1, we need to have our team set that we're going to go into an election year with. So by October 1, I hope to have to be fully staffed, but it's kind of hard to be fully staffed. So we'll try though.
Understood, but my question was maybe a little different than that. You had requested 3 FTEs in a previous budget year, which you did not fill, is
Yeah.
what I think I heard.
Yes.
You still haven't filled those thus far.
Well, and just to further explain, we've had those filled, but then you have vacancies. People leave the agency, and this happens typically after every election year because now they've learned that there's sheer amount of work, and then people leave. So when you have those vacancies, we do work to fill them. One thing I always mention is we don't have entry-level positions. Our positions do require a level of experience, and also, too, the pay scale makes it a little difficult to hire as well. That's another reason for at least raising the pay to attract better applicants as well. So in answering your question, it's not as though those positions weren't filled. We've had vacancies, people leaving the agency, and we do intend to fill those positions.
Okay. I didn't hear how much your FRS impact was. I understand there's an impact there. Any idea what that impact actually is in dollar figures?
Dollar figure, sure.
In terms of
In terms of,
the increase?
the increase was about 4.4%. We're looking at,
While you're looking for that,
it's going to be about
Just one
400,000.
second.
Go ahead.
Mr. Jacks, could you forward us the line item budget that was provided to you? So while
Yes.
we're having this discussion, that
Sure.
would be helpful. I'm sorry, but I thought it was going to take you longer to come up with that. Go ahead and answer the question.
So it's roughly, it was 342 last year, it's 399.
So to give you an idea of it, it was 342,000 last year. It's going to be about 399,000 this year.
47K, round numbers?
Round numbers.
And if we can go to the slide with the voter count through the years. I'll try to find that here on my presentation. I think it's page
Yep, I got it.
96. So just some quick math and help me understand. In 2021, if we take that year with the voter count and the amount of FTEs at 18, my math, just quick math, says that we've got 1 employee per 18,444 voters. We're increasing that now for another 5. And those 5 are going to service, round math, 7,000 voters. Can you extrapolate where we're at with that type of equation? If we're used to a full-time employee handling 18,000 plus voters, and now we're going to bring 5 on that are going to bring that down to 5 or 7,000 each. What's the direct nexus with that? Is there some algorithm I'm missing, that certain jobs are going to be done that are above and beyond what the other employees and workers are doing?
So if I understand correctly, you're trying to correlate the amount of voters a employee is going to be servicing.
Right, I'm using your presentation here, your slide
Sure.
presentation, based on FTEs per the vote count, registered voter count, and we're adding 5 between 21 and 23, 24. If we run the numbers, in 2021, which was after the 2020 election, we had apparently 1 employee per 18,000 plus registered voters. Now, under the new program, we're going to bring 5 more people on, and if we bring 5 more people on with a direct difference of about 35,000 or 37,000 different voters, that's about 7,000 voters per new employee.
Well, and you also have to have a forecast, because your voting population's never going to increase or decrease, right? It's always going to grow. So the plan is to make sure that our employees are not being overworked to such a point to where you're causing health issues. I've said this before, I've had to call the ambulance to our office several times just because of the sheer magnitude of the work and people being overworked. And I'm trying to address that because, again, you've got, if you look at the slide here, prior to 2018, 2019, you were working with 16 employees.
Right.
We are severely understaffed. And even being at 23, at a staffing table of 23, still is not where we should be from a large county SOE office perspective. We're still under the gun, but we still, I want to have a nice increase that we don't need to be doing this, have a sharp increase in employees, because here's another thing that hinders that. Space. We don't have any place to put them. So because of that, that also limits the amount of people you can hire, which then requires people to work even longer hours.
Thank you for that. That was one of the next questions I had, was understanding there's a space concern. Where are these other employees going to go? Number one, and that space has not been created yet. My next question is, if we can go to the general fund transfer history, which is page 101. And I just want to understand, I'm tracking what has been said, and I'm tracking the numbers here. And I think what I'm hearing is, we have 2.5 elections to pull off in this next upcoming budget request.
Yes, sir.
So I want to go back to, let's just start at fiscal year 20. In fiscal year 20, we supplemented 38.7% general fund was put for that general election cycle. The following year, in 21, we dropped only 14%. Then in fiscal year 2022, we went up 15.2, which brings us pretty close, or roundabouts, close to the fiscal year 20. Then in 23, we went up another 17.2%, and now we're coming into this cycle with another presidential election, bumping up 25.9%. Can you help me understand, based on the cost of 2.5 elections, understand the big election years, the presidential elections, that just doesn't cut the mustard with me when I look at those raw numbers. It doesn't add up. I understand there's more work that needs to be done. I understand there's things that have to be occurring statutorily. But to have an increase in a presidential year, drop it only by 14% would suggest you're still 20% above what it was on a non-presidential year. And then you increase another 15, brings you back to pretty much what it was in fiscal year 20, still not a presidential election, and then we continue to go up. I guess what I'm trying to track is, help us understand that argument that during a presidential election and off years, the costs are coming right back up. So if we just take for face value a presidential year, it would seem to me the costs are still going up, And on the off year, they're not coming back down in direct proportion to the previous presidential election year. And I can't, and to Commissioner Hurst's point, the line item, I've been through that line item.
Right.
And I will tell you, for me, there's not enough detail on it.
Right.
And that's what I'm concerned about. And I appreciate the line item. It's a very, in my opinion, very short, but it has very little detail on help tracking that. So I just look at this for face value, listen to what's being stated, and, you know, I'm a business guy, but this doesn't add up. This just doesn't make sense, this percentage of general revenue fund, on the notion that it only occurs, or it's always going to occur during a presidential election year, but yet it doesn't go down proportionally the following cycle.
Well,
So
yeah.
I'm just, and maybe there's a
Sure.
good reason for
Yeah,
that.
absolutely. So one of the things that you have to keep in mind is, remember, even though you're coming out of a presidential election year, you still have a portion of the cost of the general election from that previous, that year that you still have to pay for. So it's not going to go down in proportion, because you still have to pay for labor in that fiscal year. So it's not going to be proportional. Got to keep that in mind. Secondly, when you talk about 2020 to 2022, you're talking about midterms. Midterms, it's 2 elections. Presidential years, 3 elections. So that's why it's never going to be proportional. If you try and sit there and try and add this up, it's never going to meet up, because you have those, you do have an increase because you got to pay for a lot of stuff, but it's not going to be as sharp of a decrease because there's still some things that you got to finish paying for from that previous election year that are going to be in that new fiscal year. So that's why you don't see as much of a decrease as you did in an increase. Also, supplies. Paper is extremely expensive. It is much more expensive than it was prior to 20. And I can tell you right now that we require a specific type of paper. I will not tell you what that is for security reasons, but you can't just go out and buy copy paper for tabulation machines. So you have the inflation costs that are associated with those election costs that create that as well. And you also still have a portion of the election from the previous year and that off-year election that you have to pay for. So it's never going to add up.
And I appreciate that very much. Again, I don't know that I have the full answer. That's part of an explanation. I just have a hard time believing that there is that much of a jump based on what you believe it is. And I think the line item detail, if we can get that, would be very helpful in understanding.
Sure, absolutely.
Before we move to
Thank you.
Commissioner Delarey, Commissioner Herr has something that dovetails in, if you're okay with that?
Sure.
Okay.
I just want to, so the line item, which is why I didn't think it was a line item, so now I've eliminated my own confusion, has a total of 26 lines on it. For a close to $6 million budget, that's not enough detail. And the other way, I appreciate what you're saying with fiscal years, understand all that. There should be at some point a slope. And what the simple fact here is that 2020 was a presidential, 2024 is a presidential, and 2024 is 45% higher than 2020. 3.9 million to 5.7 million. And that's the differential that is just difficult to explain. The voter count did not go up commensurate with that. The voter count, by the way, the reverse math on
Right.
that is the voter count went up 10%, the staffing count went up 30%.
Correct.
It's 28% to be exact. So, and that is explainable because you're starting with a small number of employees. So a leap of 1 is an automatic when you're starting at 18, 5 or 6 percentage points. It's not going to go up incrementally aligned with the voters. But the differentials are really hard to understand and certainly to explain. So
Sure. We can
before we
certainly-
do this, we definitely need to work through the detail. If the paper cost is going up, I don't want to know what the paper is. I really don't. But I do want to understand what does that contribute into this total?
Well, let me tell you
And
one thing I did do.
every other line item for
I
that
took an average from those elections that you're talking about. 39% of our budget is directly related to election-related costs. 39%. Over half of this, the number that we are talking about, the bottom line number, is election-related costs. So I will provide a more detailed budget as you requested. I believe what we provided is what we provided in the past, right? So I understand now I'm being asked to provide more, and we will do that.
Commissioner, are you okay, Commissioner DeLaurie?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. First of all, Chris, thank you very much for breaking out the budget for your core duties and the actual election requirements for each one of the election cycles. First question I have is, and again, you know the election laws on running an office for the supervisor election better than we would. Is it the law that we actually have to send out mail ballots automatically, or people have to request them?
They have to request them. That is a
So they're
requirement.
not sent out automatically?
They are not sent out automatically, and they also have to provide identifiers to actually be processed.
Okay, good. And I know Commissioner Herr and as well as Commissioner Zimbow has been talking about this, but I've also keyed in on the numbers as well, because from 2020 to 2024, roughly, it goes up 10%, as Commissioner Herr stated. It's basically 32,000 people for the election voting group. That's about 10%, but you're asking for 25% increase, and I think it's important that we understand exactly where the numbers are and why the increase has gone up so much. It's difficult for us to see the correlation, because you can see right there on the chart, it's 25.9%, but the voting population only went up less than 10%. It's just below 10%.
Well, and to be clear, the voting population went up over a 4-year period of
understand that.
time, and so it's a 45% increase, apples to apples, on the 10.
I realize
Yep.
that, but I'm just looking at the whole numbers as well. And you're also looking at the numbers per year as well. And so it's kind of hard to do that. And I think it's important that we actually see quite a bit more detail. We're not singling your department out. We're singling everybody out. We're asking everyone for more information, because as cost keeps on going up and dollars keep on going down, we can only spend $1 once, and we just want to make sure that we're spending it correctly.
Absolutely.
And that we're being mindful and fully transparent. You can hear a lot more information as we go through our own budget, looking at our numbers. I know that the new county manager is going to be prepared for that as well. So it's not just a supervisor election.
Understood.
It's not just, whichever department's in front of us, we want as much information as possible. And again, I understand that there's security issues with paper, but we should be able to see what the increase in cost of paper is and how much paper you're using. I mean, I don't know how much detail you can show, but the correlation of what the numbers show sometime, in this particular case, gives us, at least me, and I'm hearing from other two commissioners, pause to see the percentages and the increase. They don't correlate to the amount of population of the voting block, and that's an important issue for us right now.
Gotcha.
Understand, to make sure that people are actually seeing what the true cost is.
And just so we're clear, I don't want to confuse you by thinking that it's a ballot to a voter. Remember, a
understand
voter
that.
has 3 opportunities to cast 1 ballot. So we have to prepare for a voter to vote a ballot, but they have to have 3 opportunities to do that. Prime example is, if you request a vote by mail ballot, that's $3. That's a $3 package to be sent to you, paid postage to you. But you decide, I don't want to vote that vote by mail ballot, and you want to surrender it at a polling location. A ballot has to be there to provide you upon the surrender of your vote by mail ballot. So there isn't a voter to a ballot ratio. It's actually 3 opportunities to 1 voter. So as costs increase, you still have to provide those opportunities, because no one RSVPs the SOE.
I understand that, but the trend should always be somewhat consistent, because that trend, you're talking about the voters in 2024, they're going to behave the same, or have behaved almost the same in 2020 as well as 2020 and 2016. The voting behavior is very similar for those 3 different types of, they're going to be asking for that ballot. But the number is going up exponentially, and that's what we need to figure out.
Well, if you look at the other slide, you see that we are estimating to add about 20,000 voters to the voting roll. How is that possible? In a presidential year, third-party voter registration organizations are in hyperdrive. You're going to have multiple organizations, including parties, out registering individuals to vote, and we're going to see an influx of applications coming through. I've made these predictions here before, and I was proved right in 2020. So that number, we have to project of what we're going to be servicing in those elections, and we have to cover those costs. So as you look at that slide, we're at 367 in 2024. We're at 346 right now. So you can't use the numbers that are sitting here today to try to understand the slide that you provided, because it's 20,000 more voters that we are projecting that we'll have to service next year. But I do understand your concerns, and we will make sure that we get that information to you. Thank you.
And the sad prediction is that the percentage of voters won't go up. There'll be more registered voters, but the percentage won't go up.
Yeah, the turnout, yeah.
And that's sad. Chris, I'm not going to belabor the point. I think, if I was first, I would have gone and said exactly what the others have said. So it would just be duplicating the conversation, except go back to, I think the thing that everybody is having a concern about, go back to the last slide, would you please? Is that I believe that your predecessor came in and got new machines. And what year was that?
2017.
Mid-year, was it 2020?
2017.
2017, okay. So he got the machines in 2017. I don't see what the percent there was, and I know that was, it was a mid-year adjustment.
Yes.
As I recall. But like everyone, we understood about 20. It was the last year that is clearly everybody, out of whack. I remember we went through this last year in discussions. Why are we having the increase in an off-year election? And as I recall, most of it was because, we're preparing for the next election. And now we're preparing even more for the next election. And I think that's just, again, I'm not belaboring it. I think that's the concern that all of us have. And plus the percentage of general revenue.
Sure.
If you look at the percentage of general revenue, even from 2020 to 2024, we're talking about, a very sizable increase in the percentage of the general revenue. And as I've, I don't want to say belabored it, I think it's time to talk about it. We have to start looking at, the percentage of the general revenue, not just how much everybody's asking. And just, that is clearly and I could go on, but it is not sustainable that our percentage of the general revenue, our being the county, it continues to shrink while others continue to increase. And quite frankly, although it seems maybe in your mind that a 0.6% increase is not a lot, it is. And that's the concern I think everybody has. And I say 6% from 2021 to 2024.
Absolutely. And I will make sure that we provide that information to all commissioners, because I think all of you will benefit from it.
I just have a couple of questions for you.
Yes.
Talking about the detailed budget, while the lines that were provided to us in 2020 were the same, we did at least get a year-over-year comparison, the variance and the percent of the budget that represented. So I'm not sure who's doing the line item now. Obviously, it's somebody maybe different than did it in 2020, but that at a minimum would be what I would expect to at least be able to see year over year, with the percent increase, decrease, and the dollar amount increase, decrease, and the percent of your budget. So I just wanted to make sure that you understand that I don't think we're asking for more than what you have provided in the past. I think we're asking for at least what you have provided in the past. The other thing I wanted to ask about, and I think we almost touched on it, was lapsed salary dollars. Do you have a figure for those, your lapsed salary dollars?
What we will return?
No, what have you budgeted for salaries that you have not spent?
No, but we can get that number to you.
Okay, that would be very helpful. And if we could see that over a timeline as well, that'd be great. The other thing that I would love to see that some of the other constitutionals have provided, and it's helpful for us because we're not in your operation day in and day out, is an org chart.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
if I may?
Yeah, please.
I don't mean to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
Since we're talking about new voters and total voters, we should also be talking about, to get a true picture on how many voters get scrubbed. I mean, I'm looking at a parent that's going to be dying soon, so I mean, he's not going to be voting after he's gone. So I mean, there's people that die, there's people that move away.
Sure.
In Seminole County.
Just Seminole County.
Seminole, yeah.
And we don't let that happen in Seminole County. I was trying to add some levity to the,
Thank you for doing that, Commissioner.
So, Commissioner, if I understand, you
know how many people are being
remove
scrubbed
voters?
for the voting roll
Sure.
each year or each voting section?
Well, we can, so when we do, statutorily, we are required now to do list maintenance every year. Once, what I can do is provide you the document that we provide to the Department of State, which is the DSDE 117. So you will get to see not only how many we mail out, but also to see how many removals were made.
And then the other thing, there is an election today in Duval County, Mayor of
Yes,
Jacksonville,
this is
right?
very true.
Big deal. And I have been watching voter turnout hourly. Is there a way that we can incorporate that into our transparency here in Seminole County?
Well, we already do that, so that's required by law, actually. Voter turnout has to be on the Supervisor of Elections website on Election Day. So that already exists, and we provide that.
Not hourly.
So you want it hourly now?
Yeah, that was what I said, hourly.
Okay. Oh, you want
So they
hourly, okay.
started at 8 a.m., and they said how many had turned out from 7 to 8, and then they said how many turned out from 8 to 9, and 9, and so you could watch as the day progresses
Okay.
what the turnout is for,
So
For that day.
I'm going to call Mike Hogan after I leave here. Now, Madam Chair, that might cost some more money. So
No, it might
you
not.
get right. That might cost a little money now.
I
So
was
I'm
just
gonna write that.
asking.
I'll put an asterisk next to that.
I'm thinking that somewhere in this increase over time, as I know you've been attempting to become more and more transparent and more efficient, and certainly more technologically savvy with Q-tips and aluminum foil, that there might be an opportunity to provide more transparency to the public on your website. Sometimes it's hard to get that data timely.
The hourly breakdown? Sure. I will inquire with Mike about that.
Okay, great. Any other questions from my colleagues? Commissioner Zembauer and then Commissioner Herr.
Thank you. One thing along those lines I didn't bring up was, with the 82 precincts, and something you said during your presentation about 5 points as compared to where you're at now, led me to believe that you feel that more people may vote if the SOE is moved to 5 points as compared to where it is now, as one precinct of the 82?
Well, so actually, the SOE office is not allowed to serve as a precinct on Election Day, only an early voting site. I apologize for the confusion.
Okay. And then,
But I do think it'll be better because it'll be more, we get complaints about being so far north
Sure.
a lot, so that being more centrally located.
and while you're gathering information, is it possible to provide us with a spreadsheet on precincts on how many voters actually are voting at a precinct?
Yes, that's actually required by law.
That
You can
we
actually pull that from the
see
Department of
in
State.
relationship to actual registration. And the reason I bring that up, I noticed in this last cycle, as I went around the county, you had some precincts that was like hardly anybody showed up at all. And there's another precinct half a mile down the road. So I'm
Well-
not sure.
So that would be a conversation about re-precincting, but the short answer to that is that Election Day voting is really actually a dime method of voting. Let's go to 2020. We had 104,000 people vote by mail, 115,000 people vote early, 42,000 people vote on Election Day. So it's actually, starting to shrink. However, it's required by law, so we have to do that. The reason why we had to increase our precinct size is because the county grew in that 10-year period between the redistricting. So, yes, you do have people that don't vote. Folks in that precinct might have decided to vote earlier by mail, whereas in some other areas, they may choose to vote on Election Day as some, and that's also driven by federal politics as well.
Thank you.
Commissioner Herr and then Commissioner Constantine.
I just want to clarify, I do think we gave confusing information, a confusing request. I am actually asking for more than has been submitted in the past. I do want it the way you said, where it's prior to current, and prior budget actual spend, which would get to your FTE vacancies,
Agreed.
and current, and then projected. But I also want the detail in the line items. So the compression in the line items. So it is more than has been submitted in the past.
That's what I was
Yes.
requesting as well.
Yeah.
Mine was at least this, and I wasn't supplanting her request. I was just making sure that everyone around the table and in the room and watching understands we're not asking for something more
Absolutely.
than what you have provided us in the past.
And I still want
And
what I want.
She still wants what she wants.
Understood.
Or more than or we ask anybody else. And that's one thing
That's
about
right.
the 5 commissioners. We're kind of like in solidarity when it comes to what we want and how we look at it when we're dealing with budgets. This is just a comment to the county manager. Unless there's extraordinary reason, I don't think that as we're looking at increases, that any department should have more increases, that employee salary increases than anyone else. And that would go also for part-time. I did hear something about going from 15 to 17, and Chris, I'm not, suggesting that you don't need it. If there's an extraordinary reason, that's one thing, but I think we went and put everybody at 15 part-time last year in all departments, and I just want to make sure that we keep consistent with the part-timers in, all departments, unless there's a certain reason that they need to go.
Right. And we followed along with that, Commissioner, just to make sure we did the same.
Any other questions, comments? All right, Mr. Anderson, thank you.
Thank you very
And
much.
you would just provide all of that through Tim. He'll make sure that we get it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
It'll be
Tim,
done.
you take all the notes that we asked for?
I have the notes.
Thank you. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you, you too. All right. Mr. Malloy.
Commissioner, just for terminology.
Yes.
The SOE provided account line detail. You're requesting line item detail.
Yes.
correct.
Thank you.
And they typically do provide that variance when they broke out the election from the core. That's when they submitted the single year and didn't have the variance.
Okay. We want to have our cake. We want to eat it too.
Well, I don't know about eating it, but we want to at least see it.
Speaking of cake, can you send some chocolate over this way, Jay?
We'll have to call Deborah and tell her we need a rescue fund going down here.
It hasn't gotten to this side
It's getting
today.
poultry.
Mr. Delory and I, we about killed that bull.
Mr. Malloy, welcome.
Hello, Commissioner.
I don't remember if you were here when I said if we could have all of you introduce yourselves and your
Sure.
associated titles, that would be helpful for
I'm
the
Malloy,
folks.
Clerk of the Court and Comptroller. To my left is Tony Lantry. He's our Chief Information Officer, and Jenny Spencer oversees our Comptroller as well as Clerk Finance, and he's doing a great job there. So appreciate the opportunity to speak in front of you. We met with all of you and also with the county manager and had some good conversations. So what I'll do, I'll kind of cover the first part. I'll kick it over to Jenny for the numbers, and then I'll go to Tony on the technical part as far as Article 5 if needed, and I'll give a little overview of that. I did hear the discussion this morning. It sounded like it was pretty accurate and involved, so I thought that was a good discussion. First of all, I do want to thank you all for the help over the last few years. And when I entered this office, there were a lot of broken pieces to it. And the county has really come through. I don't think we have any facilities requests this year. No, you guys have taken care of all the needs that we have had in the past, including the redundant air conditioning system over at the CJC, the additional backup generator for Record Center that we can pivot between the two, which we've already had to use on a few occasions because, well, for whatever reason, the power seems to go down at the Record Center from time to time. So I do appreciate your help on that, and the county has done a great job. Let's see here. This button. All right. This was the overview today I wanted to cover, what you have in your presentation. First of all, when we talk about the culture here, it's something I've really been working on, bringing in a professional. My theme this term I've been in office is we're skilled professionals and we serve people. Been trying to elevate the management, the culture to being one of public service. The way I sum it up is have an office that operates like Chick-fil-A with customer service and has a website that operates like Amazon. You know, just fast, easy to find, and take care of people. I am happy to report that this year we did, as I think Jenny mentioned this before, the fourth year in a row on our Citizens Financial Report, we did get the outstanding achievement for annual financial reporting for that. And also on the ACFR, it was the 41st time we received it, which puts us as one of the top 5 comptroller offices in the state. Talking about some of the improvements, I know Commissioner Hers talked about like other sources of programming and software and that sort of thing. One of the new things we did this year is we did move our foreclosure sales through a company called Real Auction. Those went live earlier, and that has a lot of advantages. One is we don't have to bring people into a courtroom anymore. Don't have to use square footage for that. Also, it opens up these foreclosure sales to more bids because it's worldwide. People throughout the country can bid. Money moves quicker. Saves us time on our side as far as FTEs trying to process any foreclosure sales. And it's been very successful. They'll just give you the number of foreclosure sales that we've processed. And then the next step, which we have already signed the contract, is with Real Auction, is to do the tax deed sales. Right now, those aren't a huge number, but it is a lot of paperwork on the recording side. This is a little bit about what we typically do on an average year, and I know there's been a lot of discussion, where does the clerk receive funding for the non-court revenue? Well, these are things that we're able to bring in funding, and all of these have been improved since I've been here. If you look at the passports, before I entered office, the clerk did not do passports. So that over 5,000 passports, you multiply that by $35 processing fee, plus photos, we generate about $250,000 extra per year in recording fees. Marriage applications is something we actually have the best system in the state. When COVID came, we quickly pivoted and we put online marriage licenses. Now, we do have to visually see you. We have to verify that it is you and you're not under duress. But we can do electronic signatures through this, look at the information you supply, such as the driver's licenses, and we can sell, as long as you're getting married in Florida, we'll sell a marriage license to anybody. We had some great stories of people coming from England, bought the marriage license from us, they landed here and ended up getting married right in our facility because they found out how much Walt Disney World charged for weddings and to change their plans and just went there for vacation. But we have a lot of great stories there. E-certified documents, we're the only county in the state that has set up its own e-certified document system. It not only saves us time on the back end, but we can also sell these documents to the public. But one of the biggest savings was with commission records, where it has saved us lots of paper and an enormous amount of time to be able to send certified documents through a secure PDF, and that has been a wonderful invention. You can see there too the wedding ceremonies we've done, and at the bottom we've recorded over 500,000 pages of recorded documents. This gives you a snapshot of the numbers. And there's been a lot of discussion about decreased funding on fees and Article 5. And this is somewhat reflected in the numbers you see there. It's been seen on the county side as well. And to kind of give you a breakdown on a typical recording fee, if you take a notice of commencement, it's a $10 fee. And it's been that same $10 fee for probably 15 years. So $5 of it is funds that go to the non-court revenue that we have. The other $4 gets broken into the Court Technology Fund. Then there's $1 that goes to the Records Modernization Trust Fund. So as you can see, if you take 27,000 notice of commencements and you do the math, that's where the revenue comes through. And it's a typical charge for that source. And these sources change all over, right? But that gives you an example of one of the things we do. And with that fund, when it comes to records modernization, this year we've done over 7,000 rolls of microfilm going back to official records and digitizing those. So that adds up to over 21 million pages of documents. And if you go online now, you can see the plats on our new due process software goes back all the way to 1913. We're back to 1945 now on our official records. And the deed books, we have all those online as well. There's still more work to do on that, and we do use private vendors to help us with the digitizing. But that's one of the big benefits that becomes valuable to people if you're doing title research. Even if you just want to research your property, and I've looked at my dad's old signature when he bought the house in 1971, and my parents signing it, as an assumable mortgage. They don't do those anymore. But you can really see this interesting information there, and it's very useful and valuable. And one of the benefits is you don't have to come into the record center and find the old microfilm and plow through it and try to find it and have an employee help you with that. You can just go out and search it yourself. Also recently, we added a new mobile-friendly interface that the vendor came up with, which works really well. This is the typical numbers we do on guardianship audits and internal audits and clerk audits and our TIP hotline. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Jenny, talk about some of the numbers, and go through the budget items.
For the record, Jenny Spencer, Director of Comptroller's Office and Clerk Finance. So during fiscal year 22, the county incurred $22.9 million of American Rescue Plan dollars, which included $16 million of revenue replacement. And the objective, the ARPA dollars, is really to help businesses and individuals that were negatively impacted by the pandemic. In addition to the ARPA dollars, approximately $11.2 million were spent providing financial assistance to individuals and families that were impacted by the pandemic. They had to illustrate the impact, the financial impact the pandemic had, and they were provided rental assistance payments as well as utility payments. As you know, the clerk also manages the county's portfolio. The portfolio balance that's there, which is approximately $830 million, is an average balance of the portfolio. The board approves recommendations made by the investment advisor, and the Comptroller's Office works with various broker-dealers to execute those trades, which includes treasury notes, federal instrumentalities, federal agencies. This does not reflect, these are only the securities that require custody with our custodian bank. It does not reflect other investments such as local government investment pools, qualified public depositories that are also part of the portfolio. So these represent the number of payroll checks. As you may know, the clerk's office is responsible for 3 payrolls: the county payroll, the supervisor of elections, as well as the clerk's payroll. So it was interesting when the supervisor was mentioning the election workers. I kind of chuckled because a lot of the election workers end up getting converted to employees. So election workers that will work, let's say, the primaries oftentimes come back for the elections, and they exceed the threshold to be considered independent contractors, and they have to be converted to employees. So those are the numbers during fiscal year 22. So our budget request for fiscal year 24, this is only for the board transfer. We'll talk about Article 5. This is for the board transfer, which are things that the board is getting direct benefit from, which includes the Comptroller's Office, a little bit of the county recorder because you all pay the rent for the record center, the Inspector General's office, and commission records. So that budget request is comprised of $4,066,442 of personnel costs, which is approximately 79%, $1,079,000 in operating and about $30,000 in capital. So the total impact, looking at last year's budget request before any amendments, is a 7.1% increase. If you factor in the recent amendment that you approved for $93,000, it would be a net 5% increase. So the next slides provides the FTE breakdown by department. Overall, it's showing a net increase of 0.42%, but there's actually 2 additional FTEs that are included in this year's budget. The reason you're not seeing it in the comptroller's office, that's one of the FTEs, is because of the allocation. So with all payroll clerks processing payroll for 3 entities, it changed the allocation. So what you're seeing is a net increase of 0.02, but there's actually 1 additional FTE for an accountant position or professional position to help fulfill all the standards requirements that were recently implemented with GASB 87, as well as new standards for the information technology agreements. The other department that had an additional FTE added is the Inspector General's office. There was an additional auditor added during April of this year, and that individual is reflected in the proposed budget for fiscal year '24. So the next slide just provides the budget by summary. I'm not sure why it's reflected like that.
It looks good on our sheet. I'm not sure what happened in the translation.
So it shows that the personnel costs represent 79% of the total budget transfer request. 6% represents professional and other services. 7% represent rental and leases, which is related to the lease at the Record Center. 7% are other operating costs, and 1% represents the capital outlay. The next slide provides a budget summary by department, so it shows you the breakdown by the department. So you'll see the Commission Records and Comptroller's Office shows a net increase of $152,000 or 7%. And then you see IT shows a small reduction in proposed budget from one year to the next, and in the other departments for an overall increase of $341,141 or 7.1%. And if you factor in the budget amendment that was recently approved, it's a net increase of $247,402 or 5% for the board transfers. The next slide provides the budget summary by account in the same format that the county would budget for those costs, which is pursuant to the uniform accounting system. And it just provides the account numbers, the object account numbers that those expenditures would be budgeted in.
And those are the numbers for our comptroller and court commission record-related budget. One thing I did want to point out, and I like to point this out every year, is I do want to get out of the Record Center lease, and I've had discussions with Darren, and I think there's a lot of opportunities we could do to reduce the cost to our office for certain. As you know, we've been reducing the paper footprint in there. We've given portion of it over to the sheriff for his uses, and I know that was a discussion this morning. I think they need to find additional use, so I know they have some interest in using part of that building. We've also stored some of the supervisor elections records there, as well as some of the, the Seminole Soil and Water Board. They have their material there as well, so we're trying to find more uses for it. And it is something that I would like to see the county continue those discussions with the county manager to find some alternative uses for it, because we will only be needing a smaller footprint as we modernize the records. Would you like, Chairman, would you like me to go into the Article 5 issue then, or do you want to?
I think, yeah, unless we have questions that we want to ask now, we want to divide this up, do questions on that portion now, and then do Article 5?
I'm fine. Mine are related to both, so.
Okay, why don't you go ahead then, Mr. Malloy?
I have one just related to this. I missed a number. So on this, the budget request for the 5.177 million, 7.1% increase over the past, but the $96,000 bar brings that up by?
It brings it down to 5%. Because the approved and amended budget would be higher, so the increase is $247,000.
Yeah, we'll wait till we get to the end to Tim's slide. In my mind, it doesn't, because the 96 wasn't recorded in last year's budget.
And
When you put a
Commissioner-
bar through in the middle of the year, what we're doing is comparing year over year with the 96K. Now it gets put in there, but
Right.
last year's increase, it didn't reflect it in there.
Well, Commissioner, that's why in the beginning slide, we did mention right off the bat, it was 7.1%, I believe it was. We're
Correct.
not trying to
Yeah,
be
that's the
clever there.
7
We're
point-
listing both numbers, but on the opening slide, we were disclosing the 7%.
So it's the 7 to 7.1.
Well, the 7.1,
That includes the 96.
yeah.
Year
Well,
over-
no, see, if you take the 96 out, if you include the 96, it would be a 5%. But this is, you always like apples and apples. This, if you compare the total funding, including the budget amendment, compared to last year, it's the 7.1%. Okay, and then regarding Article 5, I heard the discussion this morning, and when you go to Florida Statute 29.008, I'm sure you're becoming quite familiar with that. Just like phones, facilities, internet, the courthouse security, the courthouse, the county's responsible for funding the criminal-related aspects. Interesting in this statute, too, to show you kind of how archaic it is, it does mention you're supposed to pay for facsimiles and pagers, but we don't have any of that in our budget for you for that. I do want to clarify the phone issue. I like the way the phones are working now, because...
Oh, wait a minute, that's not what we heard this morning.
Well, I just wanted to clarify that. I like the phones when you can pick them up and there's a dial tone, which has been working, right? A couple years back, with the other provider, our phones would go down, so would yours and everybody's phones, property appraiser, and if you called my office, it made it sound like we hadn't paid our bill, because it would say, the number you have dialed is not in service at this time. So I do like the dial tone, and I love you guys switching to AT&T, which happened earlier. It was great. The thing we're talking about with the county IT are the enhancements you can put on top of that, the ability to chat, the ability to send an invoice off to a customer, the ability to build a profile and know what they're calling about, and that sort of thing. There's so much that's available on telephone technology now that can go on top of the dial tone.
We were talking about CRMs.
Okay.
That was what we were, yeah.
Yeah, so, but I'm all for more phone technology, but I do like the phones that are working now, so just to clarify. But on the criminal justice information system, to me, the issue is really, I think you're perusing through this right now. How much of this is your responsibility? How much is the clerk's side? Where does the funds come from? And we're all wrestling with that, and, I definitely want to work with you. I thought the judge made a pretty good explanation this morning that for historical reasons, the previous clerk never reported them. But things have changed a lot, just like we don't have faxes anymore. Lots of things are changing, and I was going to have Tony cover some of the technical aspects. But the things we have been doing have been quite remarkable. I mentioned on the recording side some of the technology with the e-certification, but we're doing things working with the jail, working with the sheriff, working with the state attorney, public defender, and the courts that are making everything better for the public and also the criminal justice system. And there's more improvements to come. And as the judge mentioned, when you look at 29.0085, we're not accurately recording the Article 5 cost right now because they've never been recorded from our side. And as you know, with the presentation you looked at earlier on page 147, you're having the same problems we have, is there's a decrease in recording revenue. And that's for a couple reasons. One is higher interest rates drive down mortgages and recording activity. But the other thing is all these fees on our side are set in state statutes. The $4 court technology fund is $4 today, and it's $4 10 years ago, and $4 is not the same as it was 3 months ago. So we're having to do more on the court technology side. On our side, we've been paying it out of recording revenue, not only the $1.90 on our side, but going into, for instance, on the notice of commencement, we've been going into the $5 to take that and subsidize what should be county fees. So, we're trying to make it transparent. It needs to be recorded correctly. I think the county does need to fund the proper criminal justice side of it. It needs to be recorded correctly, reported to our legislators. You know, at some point, I think you need to index these fees to inflation or have some other back end from the state to help out with this. These complexities that occurred from Article 5 and 2000, I was here on the commission when the commissioners were pushing for that amendment. And part of that was the Florida Association of Counties wanting to push the cost off to the state to cover costs that were going on with the county. Well, when the fees stayed the same from back then, it's just created these challenges where eventually a system implodes. So public safety is, one of our most important responsibilities. And at this point, it's becoming tougher and tougher to provide the services we need to. And it's not a good, it's not a funding model that works. I think state legislator David Smith said the best in an article. He said, if you wanted to create a funding system for courts, you would not build something like this in today's world. It just is not something that's sustainable. So when you look at, I'll let Tony talk about some of the technological improvements that we've been doing, so you kind of know where we're going, what we've been doing.
In 2019, we started a project to implement a new judicial viewer system. It's a system that was adopted by OSCA, the Office of the State Court Administrator, and it's in about 27 counties statewide. But Seminole had traditionally had more functionality than what the OSCA product had. So the clerk had taken the responsibility to develop the additional enhancements necessary for the judges in our circuit to be able to do their job. That included signing documents, it included being able to see a progress docket of documents that are on the case file, being able to receive electronically filed orders, being able to submit documents back to the clerk's office. Those are the types of things that we needed in order to be able to move forward. And then COVID hit, and we did a fast forward on the implementation of this judicial viewer, and we were able to keep up with the COVID demand of being able to hold court, be able to look at case files, being able to continue to do work, even though a lot of the counties around Florida could not, and that's because we had the technology to do it. When Grant walked in the door in 2017, the systems that were in place could not have handled that type of implementation. The systems were too old, too slow. There was no internet access to court records. There was not significant internet access to official records. There were certainly no marriage licenses online. And a few of the enhancements that we've made to the systems over the years have allowed us to have a level of productivity enhancements within the criminal justice system that's probably difficult to see from this vantage point. We now have e-subpoenas. E-subpoenas might not mean very much to you for law enforcement until you realize that before electronic subpoenas, you had a 2 or 3 day lag in getting the subpoenas to law enforcement to show up to court. You have a 0-day lag now. What that means is that more law enforcement officers are able to attend court when they're supposed to, and that helps the justice system move more quickly. We're in the middle of a project right now with the Sheriff's Office to create an electronic warrants system that allows law enforcement from anywhere to be able to create a warrant. The judge signs it, it goes to the court, and continues to make that electronic workflow in close to real time. And what that means to the public is that a paper process can take up to 7 days for a warrant to flow through. A semi-electronic process is what Seminole has right now, could take up to 3 days for that warrant to make its way through the system. And what problems that causes is that you have a warrant that needs to be served, and you've got bad guys possibly on the street, and you've got a 3-day lag sometimes to get them where they need to be. So that's a public safety issue that we're trying to resolve. And on the flip side of that, recalling a warrant. It was a multi-day process to recall a warrant that might have been issued in error. So you've got the possibility of people that might be arrested on warrants that shouldn't be arrested. And I think that's a bad thing for everyone. Those are problems that we're trying to solve. But the interesting thing about solving those problems is it introduces efficiencies to the entire criminal justice system that allows it to flow better. We're able to do more with the people that we have to create a better environment for our constituents to do business with the clerk's office and other criminal justice agencies.
Did you want to go through those other slides too? I know you kind of jumped through it.
So before we
Yep.
start going through slide by slide, I
Okay.
just do want to point out, we are losing 2 commissioners at 4 o'clock. We'll still have a quorum, but if there's an opportunity maybe to jump to questions, since each of us had an opportunity to already have individual briefings with you, that might be,
Sure.
if you're willing to do that.
So you've seen the presentation. I can go through these things. Well, you know, and the judge mentioned this morning, the response to COVID, our ability to pivot was very quickly. You know, we were able to move very quickly. We shifted to the electronic record as the official court record. We've been advancing things. And I sent you the photo that was in the original presentation that we sent, and it showed the old tape drive backups that we had. You know, and I know there's a lot of talk about comparing, you know, this to the past and this and that, but there's been substantial investment in technology. You know, when you look at what we're doing today compared to 6 years ago, you cannot compare the two. We had IT people to drive the tapes down to the record center, put them in the vault. You know, if you had a system breakdown, it would be 3 weeks to restore it. You know, those days are in the past, thank goodness, and we're moving to a modern world, modern platform. You know, in the past, it used to take a couple weeks for a user to be added to J.D. Edwards as a county employee. We do that, you know, same day. So the amount of service we're providing is substantially different. And final thing is, okay, well, these were the numbers on it. We have the operations side of the numbers, and then there's the programming side of the court technology. This is just a portion of the expense we have. You know, there's still the civil side. There's the part of juvenile probate, domestic violence issues that are civil citations. You know, we switched our entire system away from paper traffic citations to real-time electronic citations that you can see online, pay online, as soon as we receive it from the nightly download. It's a whole different world there. And there are a lot of unintended good things that happen from this. If you look on our side, the positives that occur to this, if you look in 2008, our courtside FTE count was 194, and last year it was 132. I'm operating the courts with 62 fewer FTEs, and it's a struggle. We're getting things done. We couldn't get it done without technology. If we didn't have an investment in this, you know, it would break down. The system would break down. But that results in a smaller footprint. If we had an extra 60 employees there, if we had people, if our call center was 100% inside the office, we couldn't have taken a 25% reduction in square footage with this recent remodel. We'd probably be asking for more space for the future. So that's, you know, there are savings out there. There's benefits to judges where they can do things faster, as you heard from Judge Rexledler saying she can work at 11 o'clock at home signing documents electronically. That simply didn't happen in 2000, well, before I got in office and we did these improvements. So that, you know, that we're trying to be transparent, show you what we're spending, answer questions, and work with you all to move forward on this. It's a challenge for all of us, and, you know, thank you for your time.
All right, questions, and I'm sure we will wind up digging back into some of those slides. Commissioner Zembauer.
Thank
And
you.
then Commissioner Delory.
Grant, thank you very much. I appreciate the technology explanation, and I'm all about technology. I'm also all about putting bad people where they belong. But the most important question I have, and I have several, and you spend a great deal of time, you and your staff at my office, so I appreciate that. On the technology that you have deployed in building these efficiencies, of those, which are Article 5 responsibilities, and what others, if not under Article 5, are mandated in some other statutory requirement?
I'm not sure if I understand the last question, the last part of that.
If not Article 5, are they required in some other statutory requirement in this technology?
Well, the Article 5 relates to the criminal justice information system. It's a component of our overall
Understood.
technology cost.
Right.
And, you know, the financial software is one thing, the recording software is another. There's all sorts of ancillary payment systems and interfaces with everybody from AMSCOT to child support transmission. So there's a lot of different technology going on. Of the $1.90, that gets used between civil-related cases and criminal. What we're showing you here is separating out the criminal costs to make that transparent. So I don't know if that, does that answer your question?
Well, I think it does
As far
to a certain extent. What I'm really trying to get at, and you may not be able to answer this, is the technology that you're deploying, is it the minimum? Is it above the minimum? Or is it just right?
You could always do more. I mean, we're working on the e-warrant system with the jail. There could be a paperless floor of workflow with the jail that would be much more of a benefit to us. But we've made a lot of progress. There's still some to do.
Right.
But you could always do more. I will say part of the problem, and I mentioned to all you too, is we get hit with things that don't benefit the county. When FDLE tells us we have to work on the criminal justice data transparency transmissions, because that was a law a couple years ago and state senators are demanding this data flow, we had to drop everything for 4 months and divert all attention, and so did the clerk technology company. Every clerk statewide dropped everything for several months to focus on this new requirement, and we don't get funding from the state on that. We're just told you got to do it. And there's things like that all the time. Recently, OSCA was wanting to request clerks to do microsecond recording of every court document, which we don't have the technology for. So sometimes you get hit with mandates that are maybe great ideas, but impossible to enact.
Well, that's what I'm getting at. When I heard the presentation earlier, when there's X amount of counties in the state that are doing certain things and the others are not. And then my question specifically is, are they not because they're not mandated to do so, and we are just ahead of that curve on a mandate, or we're actually complying with the mandates?
I'll let Tony address that.
Well, when I mentioned, for example, the judicial viewer, 27 other counties throughout the state are using the same base judicial viewer that we're using from OSCA, the Office of the State Court Administrator. The other counties, every county is running a judicial viewer, but possibly from other vendors.
Sure.
So everyone is doing what we're doing. They're just possibly doing it slightly differently. As far as the integration with the jail for first appearance paperwork, coming over to the clerk, creating cases, getting the inmates processed as soon as possible, getting them in front of a judge. Some counties do that much better than we're doing that right now. Our goal is to do it very well in very real time. We've been working with the sheriff's team on making that project a reality. In fact, if we look at some of the initiatives that were up on the board a little while ago, the criminal case initiation initiative is a statewide initiative that was authorized by the Supreme Court of Florida that made Seminole County the pilot county for criminal case initiation. So we are recognized as one of the leaders in the state now for being able to implement these types of things.
And I'll handle this offline in the interest of saving time. What I'm more interested in is what is actually being funded under the mandates, and what are we doing beyond that we're funding? Because it's more efficient, better for our county, those types of things. That's what I'm trying to understand, the difference between the two. And I don't know that all of us have the answers at this point.
So you want the actual cost of, for example, MECOM, the mental health reporting, the criminal justice data transparency initiative that we had to perform, those types of things?
Yes.
Okay. It is substantial.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
Mr. Valari.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Grant, thank you very much. I always appreciate your presentation. You definitely try to be as transparent as you can, and I appreciate that. With your request for additional money to have the general fund Article 5 request of the $969,000, can you tell me in a little more detail of with the Article 5 money? It's $4. Two goes to the courts, two goes to the county to fund this. What's the litmus test for using general funds and/or court technology trust funds? How do you decide which goes where? What that
Well, right now, we don't get general fund money for court technology.
But you're asking us to do that.
That's what we're discussing. So in a way, these are costs that are already being paid. They're being paid through reduced return excess fees. Part of the problem of basing a system on this is we don't know what the excess fees would be, and as you can see, fees have been declining. So currently, there is not a general fund component. We have been paying for this historically out of court fees, recording fees. As far as, so in essence, we're paying for this. There should be an additional return of surplus funds at the end of the year. However, when I've tried to anticipate what that be, in the past, it resulted in pre-budget cuts, which makes it even more difficult to try to fund the office because we have to take all the risk up front to try to assume and guess what the costs are going to be on technology. We don't have, other than the ability to set aside some money for future things like a case maintenance system, that sort of thing, and committed projects for refreshing computers. We don't have a savings account. We return everything at the end of the year.
So I'm looking at the CAFTA, and in the CAFTA, it shows that there's a balance of $5.3 million in Public Records Modernization Trust Fund, and then there's another $5.7 million in the Court Technology Trust Fund. Since this is to do with the courts and Article 5 and technology, why wouldn't we be using the trust fund set aside for the courts of $5.7 million and using that?
Well, that's a good question. And the reason is the first trust fund is for records modernization. It's not used for court technology.
Okay.
There's a nuance in there. There was a third trust fund that disappeared when I took office that had $2 million in it. That's what we used to refresh all the computers when I entered office. The other one is we are allowed to set aside savings for future IT improvements. I know Commissioner Hurd mentioned about buying off-the-shelf case maintenance system. We are going to have to do something at some point because the technology we have is old. So we're going to either have to, at some point, pivot to a vendor which has a lot of cost involved. You're looking at an excess of $5 million for getting a vendor. The other idea I think has a lot of potential is working with the Clerk Association Technology Company on a kind of a different model of clerks working together. It's something I've been pitching for a couple years, and it's kind of revolutionary. But there are a handful of clerks' offices that have advanced IT offices and a lot of talent like ours. There's Volusia, Lee County, Hillsborough. There's a few counties around that have some deep talent. And to getting them to work together in a coalition to build a new software, a new generation of case maintenance system that can then be managed by the Civitech Court Technology Company, I think has a lot of merit. It's something I haven't given up on. I know the Clerk Association is interested in, and so is Melvin Cox, their IT director. But the bottom line is the state allows us to refresh computers, buy computers, and those have, and also case maintenance systems, which have a huge cost involved. That's what that money's for.
But I realize, from what I'm hearing from you, that maintenance should be for the public records request, Public Records Maintenance Modernization Trust Fund. That's the $5.3 million. But then you got the Court Technology Trust Fund of the $5.7. Why wouldn't you use that for the $969,000?
Right, okay. Well, we do spend more from the expenses we have on court technology than we bring in through the court technology fees. Where we make up for it is on the extra non-court revenue. That's where we put the savings aside to handle these problems that we could face in the
I'm having
future.
issues using the general fund to fund the court's technology when there's actually money in that trust fund to do that.
If we spend all the money in the trust
I didn't say
fund,
spend all of it.
it
I didn't
leaves
say
us
that.
with nothing.
Right.
And
But I mean, you're asking
if you go
for-
back to I think the question here is, are you guys interested in following through on the 29008? Or is this something you expect the clerk to keep paying the court technology costs?
I'm looking at it, you have a trust fund of a little over $5 million.
And if we have to buy a case maintenance system, that would be more than $5 million.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Commissioner Hurd?
I don't think we have in our possession a history of those two funds, particularly the one that Commissioner Delary referenced. So maybe we need a 5-year history of what the balance in that fund has been to see whether the fund is accumulating. I think there was a statement made earlier, which might need a little bit of clarification. I think you were talking about the other side of the house when you said you sweep all of your funds at the end of the year. You have no reserves. These do, in fact, stay in reserve. This is this side of the house. That was that side of the house. For limited purposes, which is typically a reserve. So I would concur with Commissioner Delary that I appreciate that at some point, although in our conversation, we were sort of completely committed to retaining 7 code writers on staff at full government level benefits to build this system and maintain this system, and now we're talking about a little bit of a pivot.
Well, Commissioner Hurd, the one thing that you asked me to do was to reach out to Sarasota and see how they were funded and the size of their staff, since they are of similar tax size. The clerk's office there has 21 employees. They have 8 project managers. So, and if you look
For software alone?
For software alone, yes, ma'am.
Can we buy it from them? It seems like maybe we'd get a deal. Like, it baffles me just from a layperson's perspective.
They've implemented Pioneer there. It's a very time-consuming implementation and maintenance process with Pioneer.
So let's not imitate that. Let's just leave that aside. But what baffles me is that from a statewide perspective, we have 67 counties and 67 of us are doing this. And I don't remember the number you referenced, but we have several that are all writing their own code to do the exact same thing. That seems crazy.
I'm sorry, it's not really the exact same thing. Unfortunately or fortunately, each county has their own judges, and the judges have the power to do the things a lot of the way that they want to do them. And the systems are implemented in each county in a way that satisfies the needs of the local judiciary.
So it rings true to my heart that we're blaming the judges, just to be clear. You just played right into my playbook. I wasn't even trying on that. But at the end of the day, the laws are the laws, and a subpoena is a subpoena, and it's handled very similarly. I mean, I think your idea is brilliant, to try to pull a coalition together to try to reduce the expenditures on a run rate basis and probably come up with a better system than you can do in county by county. Where I am stuck is that we're sitting on 5.7 million, which you may at some point have a view to an expenditure, but you're asking the county what went from 0 last year to 969,000 this year, and that's a tough nut to swallow, and so I'm stuck there.
Right. Well, and the cost have always been there. It's just coming out of recording revenue paid for by the clerk, which is not what the Florida statute says. So the last time I brought this up when I got elected, I had the same reaction. Now, somehow the courts can come in, the state attorney, others can come in here and get funded by the Florida statutes. But when I come in, as was stated, I think Judge Rexedler said, you're the only county that doesn't pay for court-related criminal justice technology. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but she made that statement. If I were paying for potholes, and I came in here, I told you guys, hey, it's time for you to pay for potholes, and you say, well, wait a second, you got some money left over. To me, it's the same sort of principle. There's a Florida statute that says what is supposed to be funded. We're hitting the wall on revenue. I'm hitting on both sides. And, I'd like to have a partnership and working with you. If there's a transition where we move into something where you cover operating costs the first year, that'd be great. We're more than happy to work with your technology, but I'm just letting you know we're doing a lot of great things. Sure, we have some savings aside. We're going to need those. when it came, I'm not pivoting here, we've always talked about, it even has 167 is the name of the idea that's been pitched by the Clerk Association. You know, it's something we've talked about. I think you mentioned offshore programmers. We got it, you know, that was not something I wanted to pivot to or really entertain. We've got a great team doing great things.
Absolutely.
And that.
And I'll take that out, put that back in context in a second.
Okay.
Because that was out of context.
But, you know, we are doing a great job. We're transparent. And I can give you, you know, numbers all day long and show you, but there's only so much money we get. We spend extremely wisely. And I'm coming to you just stating this is what we spend already. And, you know, it's a frustrating position to be in here and try to explain a complex system. And you know, one of my last slides is all the compliments we got. If you go right now to talk to people trying to deal with the other county in our circuit who are changing case maintenance systems right now, and it's very dangerous when you change it. So when I came in here, yes, we had our own case maintenance system. Volusia has one too. That's one of the reasons why I brought Tony over from Volusia. He has the experience on a homegrown network. Would it be great to throw this out and start over? That's a big risk. It's a big risk. We've been doing great things, and what we have works. Does it need to be better? Yes. It's going to be expensive when we get there. But I get very passionate about this because I just feel like this team doesn't get the credit it should get. You know, other you know, partners walk in and talk about the great things they're doing, and you guys seem to be happy. I come in, and it's like, hey, you got $5 million, you got this and this, and it's like, okay, you know, what do you want me to do? If you just want me to keep doing what I'm doing, you know, we'll go along. But I don't know if you can.
I'll weigh in, Grant, from the perspective of, we certainly don't want this to be frustrating, and maybe you weren't here for the previous session, because I suspect that was equally frustrating, and I believe we do this to our own departments as well, as Commissioner Constantine said earlier. I think the challenge is that we don't have transparency into that fund and how it's grown. I'm sure you're transparent with it somewhere, but we don't have it, and that would be helpful. I also don't necessarily understand the history of those funds coming in and what the projection going forward is. We're coming out of a rocky period. Your concept of transitioning might be a worthy one to discover more about. I would also like to know, perhaps this was not an accurate statement, but Judge Rex Seidler indicated that we're not getting state funding as a result of not recording things appropriately. So I'm a little bit stuck on, we can record appropriately and go to the state and not fund out of the general fund, or do we have to fund out of the general fund in order to go to the state? What is the catch-22 on that? Because it doesn't seem to me that the source of the funding and the recording appropriately that we're blaming Mary Ann for, which was a long time ago, is a fair statement. So can we get the recording correct so that we can go to the state and maybe eliminate the problem, and then we can help transition this? We don't, and I would also bifurcate the challenge with the cash, the challenge with we are placed to steward the taxpayer's dollar, and the statement that we don't believe that your folks are doing amazing work. People around the county are all doing amazing work. You're doing amazing work. The sheriff's doing amazing work. Lots of amazing work getting done. This meeting is about how do we protect the taxpayer spending.
Right, I'm all for that. Do you want to cover the Article 5 reporting?
Yeah, so Commissioner Zembauer needs to leave in 10 minutes, so if we could, we'll definitely get to answering that, but go ahead, Commissioner Zembauer.
I'll just add, Commissioner Hurd is doing wonderful work as well.
Even in the short seat.
Here's my observation on this, and I understand the frustration, and I haven't had the opportunity, nor is it the right time, to share my frustration with my fellow commissioners, because we're still digging into some of this. But since the day I've arrived here, and I'm not going to speak for the commissioners who have been here longer than I've yet to see a line item breakout of Article 5 as well as 29008. And without that, we as commissioners and decision makers are only stuck with the information we're provided. Grant and I know he has raised this issue at least 4 years that I'm aware of, not to the depth that he has now. But the reality is, we should fund what we're required to fund. The state should fund what they're required to fund under statutory requirements. If we're not following the state guidelines, that's on us. And that's very important to me, because there's going to come a time, if it is a problem with state funding, not only myself, but I'm sure my fellow commissioners are going to weigh in at the state level going, hey, you're not funding your fair share. But over the last several months and digging into this, I've yet to have anybody be able to show me, here's what's been happening, here's what we've been doing, this is the minimum required by the statute. I don't know what that is, because it's not broken out. And I think until we understand and what the policies and procedure are at the state level and understand what we've paid for. I mean, I've sat on this commission, their budget sessions, and heard it said, we need this at the courts, but we can't get funding under Article 5, and we're funding it. Well, that's fine and good, but ultimately, we've got to arrive at what is our responsibility and what is theirs. And that's, to my point this morning, I'd like a very deep dive and briefing on what we're supplementing on behalf of the state right now on all lines, including Article 5. I think that's going to be an eye-opener for all of us. And then where do we go from there? I think to Grant's point is breaking this out, is forcing the conversation of, is it on us? Is it on them? Is it a little bit of both? And none of us want to go to the state and bang on the table if we haven't been doing what we're supposed to do. So, for what it's worth, thank you.
Madam Chairman?
Yes.
If I may, and I'm going to extend or continue what Commissioner Zimba was talking about. Grant, your whole department, including yourself, is doing a phenomenal job. That is not the issue. The issue, and looking back, we've always funded to the best of our ability, the courts. And just the renovation factors that we're talking about at 5 points proves to us and proves to anyone that we've funded the court system. We're funding a new courtroom. Hopefully we can pay for it. But the point that I'm getting at is that we've never once said no, but now it's coming to a point where, as Commissioner Zimba and Commissioner Hurst said, we need additional details, no more information. I didn't realize that you can go to the state and ask for more money. The judge told us that today, and that's why I want more information.
Okay.
We can go to the state and want more money. Let's do it.
Right. And
that's what it's all about.
As far as the trust fund balances, they've actually decreased since I've been here, because we did the computer refresh up front. They've been about stable. We can, give you that information.
Grant, there's no doubt when you took office, you had to go uphill immensely with technology, and you've done a phenomenal job. We're trying to help you.
Right.
But the way to help you is to try to find more money. The way to find more money is to go to the state. And that's what we're trying to figure out.
The funding model, in my opinion, is broken when it comes to courts. It's a broken system, and then comes the part, how do you fix it?
Don't know yet.
And that's it. But Jenny she was going to cover about the reporting, the one question.
Sure. So how it works is we have the record center, which we call the fee fund. As revenues are earned in that fund, not just from recording activities, but the information I provided to Lori included revenues such as passport, marriage licenses. So as revenues came in, and at the end of the year, as we got closer to the end of the year and revenues were available, that's when finance would notify the leadership team, this is how much is available in the fee fund, which is from recording activity. And that's when IT would say, these are the court-related projects that need to be funded, and those dollars would be used for that. So Lori did say, I provided her the fee fund activity from 2019 on through 2022. She did come back and ask for the detail on the trust funds, which I've not had an opportunity to address because the request came in late yesterday afternoon. And I've not had an opportunity to address that. But the trust funds are audited, and they are included in the clerk's financial statements. Now, prior to the last couple of years, since I've been involved with clerk finance, I'm not sure if the notes to the financial statements separated the two trust funds to say which one was public records modernization versus court technology. That's something that I know with my involvement in 2021, we separated to show the two. In the county's audited financial statements, because the clerks gets consolidated, that number appeared as a lump sum, court modernization. And with that, Lori came back, and I gave her the detail. This is the detail of what makes up the $11 million. But the clerk is correct. In the Court Technology Fund, that's where those programmers are funded, and what comes in has not been sufficient to cover those salaries.
Yeah, that last year, we spent about $275,000 more than we brought in on the $1.90 fund. You know, that's hard to keep matching. Also, the savings, I would point out, part of the savings that were built up, I inherited because there wasn't an IT director for 10 years. There were, 6 guys in there breaking, their chops. We had programmers changing printer cartridges. It was, it was no records online. So part of the reason Mary Ann left the money there is she didn't spend it, and it's been sitting there. I've been trying to protect it and use it wisely, also recognizing at some point we do have to do a refresh in technology to keep up with security standards. The future between AI and those, what's that other computer coming along? The one that operates in absolute zero. There's a whole challenge ahead of us that we got to stay current with technology, and it's going to be a challenge.
We love zeros, especially when it comes to budget requests.
So,
I
Commissioner
haven't seen
Dunbar-
any yet.
No.
So I think the report back on the fee fund was that in 19 it was $744,000, in 20 it was $452, in 21 it was $1.37 million, in 22 it was $1.17 million.
That is correct. Those are
And that
Article 5.
1.17 was $275,000 short,
In addition to that, correct. So
but
when
we're
Lori
asking
has,
for $1 million.
as Lori has requested, when we provide the breakdown of the two trust funds, you will see the $1.90, which is the core technology fund, 800 something thousand came in revenue, and $1.1 million were incurred in expenditures for a net deficit of $265.
And the $1.90 is not just criminal technology. It's civil and other aspects to it.
But we're asking for $1 million. So the fee fund last year covered all but 275, but we're asking for $1 million. So this is where the frustration on our side comes. 275, $1 million. Why? So maybe that's the transition plan we should figure out, but that's the piece that I think is a little bit of a struggle. What happens if we fund the $1 million and that fee fund continues to build? Does it just goes into the trust fund that we don't want to touch?
No, additional excess fees would be returned to the county at the end of the year.
So it sweeps?
That is correct.
So how does the trust fund build? Mary Ann didn't spend money on, which if we replace the entire spend with the $1 million, you won't be spending money either.
I think we're mixing the two
Well, that's
funds.
why I'm asking.
Okay, so in the fee fund, whatever is not spent at the end of the fiscal year, it gets returned to the Board of County Commissioners. So when those IT court-related projects or expenditures were funded out of the fee fund, whatever is left at the end of the year is what got returned. So if those funds are being budgeted and paid for by the county, the Article 5, those dollars don't come to the clerk with the exception of the salaries. They would be budgeted within the records of the Board of County Commissioners. So the fee fund, any excess would then return back to the Board of County Commissioners. And the benefit of separating it and including in the county's records, because the Comptroller's Office prepares the Article 5 report, which gets audited by MSL, and it gets submitted to the Department of Financial Services every year on January 31st. So, Commissioner Zambauer, to answer your question, if you wanted to go back and see for the last 10 years, what have we reported in revenues in terms of Article 5 versus expenditures to see what the unfunded mandate is, that information is available. It's audited and it gets submitted to the state.
And I appreciate that. but there's other procedures that certain individuals and constitutional officers have to make in order to request and budget for the Article 5. That's not outlined at all in there, at all. I appreciate the fee portion. What you can't find is the mandate and the policy and procedure for that request in advance through the state. Not related to the clerk.
Okay.
There's other Article 5 stuff in 29008, and that's why I asked early this morning that we really need to go take a deep dive.
Mr. Gray?
Yeah, and that's what I just wanted to add. And so now we've all been frustrated over the last couple of weeks. I have actually been meeting with the clerk and his staff, so thank you for that, just getting an education and all that. Our finance team has been looking at it too. So I would suggest that, just what we said this morning, let us put it on this follow-up for the next budget discussion, which is in a month. That would give me and my team time to work with their team as well, with our great attorney as well, to look at Article 5 and what it is and what it isn't, and then what our responsibilities are, and outline exactly what we need to pay, or both revenue and expenditures out of it.
And as part and parcel, it'd be helpful, I think, for us as decision makers to delineate what
Right.
we're actually funding now that we should not be funding
Right.
historically.
Right. Right.
Will be helpful.
So I will just make one request, to ask for the same line item budget detail for the clerk's office, if we haven't already received that we asked from the supervisor of elections earlier.
I'm not sure I understand, because we provided a line item budget detail for the board transfers or Article 5?
Yes.
We did for both. We did for both with the object account numbers.
I think they're requesting the line items below the object account, the actual...
Sub-accounts.
Yeah, the budget items that make up the account line detail.
So for example, if we were asking for training, you want the detail of training? Is that, I want to be sure we're clear on what's being requested.
Well, we want year over year, not just what you're requesting this year, but year over year by item, line item, and then the sub-account of what makes up that item. So if it's, and so not to sound, so you've got operating supplies, equipment, and tech, $52,000. What is it? Yeah, and that's just one that I'm just reading right there, but repair and maintenance.
Are you asking this of all constitutional officers, including the sheriff?
We received it already from a couple, and we've asked for it from the others we've not received it from. Yes. I mean, yes.
Okay.
If we haven't asked for it yet, we're about to. Yep.
Well, and to be quite honest, if the budget ask is within the additional revenue that's coming in, then it's a different need.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And just one final slide. This year, we had a record on Operation Greenlight, helped 1,434 cases paid in full. You know, ironically, between that, Operation Greenlight, and Judge Rex Seidler mentioned the additional civil cases being filed, just the craziness of this system. We returned what to the trust fund, 300,000 last month? You remember the number?
Over 300,000.
Yeah, so we had, because we over-collected for our monthly cap, we sent over 300,000 to Tallahassee, so to be put back into the trust fund, which then gets divvied up later. It's, again, if you try to create a system like this to fund a court, you wouldn't probably do something like this. It's a very strange system of what goes where. Yeah, so we did collect more than we were allowed to keep. And so we had a great, got some coverage as well on the TV stations, and had a really good turnout. And a lot of this we're doing online now, which has been really helpful to citizens.
Let me clarify, in my conversation with the folks at the Sheriff's Office, they will not be providing all of their detail for obvious reasons. But
Okay.
we don't need to know what make and model of different things are for obvious reasons. So thank you very much. We appreciate it. We're going to go ahead and take a 10-minute break and come back and allow the commissioners that need to get on with their other commitments to move on, and we'll resume at 4:15.
detail.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
We're going to reconvene from our break, the budget work session, and then there were three, and Ms. Patrick. Thank you so much for being here. If you would introduce yourself and the agency that you're here representing, and we'll start talking about your budget.
Yes, ma'am. My name's Amber Patrick. Thank you for saying the D and not Trick. I am with the Guardian Ad Litem office, the statewide office, and I am the Assistant Circuit Director for Circuit 18, which is Brevard and Seminole counties.
Amber, I'm going to jump in. So
sorry.
we have a,
This was the one thing he told me. He had one instruction for me, and it was when we get to, I'm going to, and then I blew it. I'm so sorry.
I will tell you that Mr. Jex and Miss Wendy have been astronomically helpful in this whole situation, so thank you.
Thank you.
we're happy to
Mr.
help.
Jex.
So our county manager requested a few additional slides to help give some context to the funding that we provide to some of the agencies. So the Guardian Ad Litem's total funding is approximately $850,000 for fiscal '23. 85% of that comes from the state in the form of paying for 16 state employees. So the county funds about 14% of their total budget. They use our funds, which come from our general fund. They use those funds to pay for one FTE. They currently have one temporary position and then various program supplies. Their fiscal '24 budget is going to $154,000. It includes one additional FTE and then the elimination of the temporary funded position, which is in operating. So now I'm going to turn it over to Amber to talk a little bit about her budget.
Thank you very much. The 14, as you can see up there, we work really hard as an office to outsource some of our needs. And many of you are very familiar with our agency. We work with community laypersons. We train and support volunteers to do the work for the children that we represent in the county and in the state. Our nonprofit law just made our nonprofit essentially not a direct supporting agency, so we're going to be working through that transition. But currently, the nonprofit, what they help us with, the 1%, is essentially the children's needs. What items are they needing in their home? Beds, clothes, school items. And they celebrate our volunteers. They put on some of the activities for the retention purposes, for our volunteers to stay and do the important work that they do yearly. The state office employees include OPS, which I'm sure many of you experience the same troubles that we have with those type of temporary positions and filling those type of temporary positions, especially in the employment economic status we have now. With this county contract position we have, it's very tough to keep someone in that seat because of the situation that it is. 30 to 32 hours on an average, with hourly wage and no paid time off, no benefits. So we are asking that to be transferred into a full-time position, which means we have that offset. They are very instrumental, this particular staff support and the other FTE that you do fund for us, they are instrumental in our day-to-day business. As you heard, there have been many changes in the clerk system, and they have been very helpful, and they help us on a daily basis to get those filing systems into our state database, which is two completely different databases, two different clouds, and then trying to transfer those that information. Just to give you a small idea of the increase in children coming into care, before 2020, the 2020 pandemic, COVID pandemic, when I first came to this county, we had 450 children that we served within our agency, with about 160 volunteers helping us to support those children. In April 2021, the pandemic had greatly affected us. We only had about 148 volunteers, and they were serving 563 children. That is over 100 more children per year. In April of 2022, we went up just a little bit with our volunteers at 151, but we went up in children of 636. That is a 12% increase in just that 1 year of children, with volunteers unfortunately not coming or to serve us because of the fear of the pandemic. And then this year we are down to 140 volunteers because of our OPS position. It's a state-funded position. We have not been able to fill our recruiter position for 1 full year. Thankfully, we have someone starting in June. But you're looking at the recruiter, and of course, I'm just not able to impact the community as much as a person who does it full-time. So we've gone down to 140 volunteers serving 621 children. Now, I will tell you, in the last 4 years, we have worked hard to ensure that we have taken our 92% of representation of the children in dependency care. We are proudly at 99% representation of the dependency care children that are in Seminole County. So we are just shy of that 100% mark. And some of that 100% are just children who are in home or just working through services with the department and may not need someone to express their best interest because their parents are doing so. So with this new technology, and the increase of cases coming into care and the children coming into care, we have fallen behind in that the technology realm in transferring the clerk of court information into our state database, and that is where this new support position, this full-time employee position, it will greatly help us moving forward. So I just wanted, we can go to the next, I just wanted to inform you that we have been, in the past, we've utilized volunteers to help us in this, in the office, just filing system, whether it was paper, now it's virtual. Because of the decrease in volunteers and the increase of children, we have not been, they have focused on the child aspect and away from the office needs, which again just expressed the need for our single budget request that we've made this year. And we've worked hard to ensure that we've been consistent. We have not asked for budget requests year after year. We have really worked hard on outsourcing those needs. We just find ourselves in a tough position this year.
Well, thank you. And I remember last year feeling like we should have had you go first to set the bar for doing more with less. And we just know that the services that you provide are so incredibly critical to the children and families in this community. Questions for Ms. Cadrick? Yes, sorry.
I'll just make a comment that we've been through this process as adoptive parents, and our child, the only person that was consistent with him through the entire process was the guardian ad litem. Yes. Everybody else was rotating around multiple places. And so I'm going to go on record to say I'm wildly supportive of your 31% budget increase request, because it's just a service that will change the trajectory of someone's life. And we had the sheriff here earlier talking about if we can get in early and we can do the right thing, that's what you're doing, and that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I've always been impressed with the way, guardian ad litem has done statewide. And so, what you're doing is quite impressive. I just wanted to make sure, you're eliminating one position to add another position.
Yes, sir.
Is
We're
that-
eliminating a contracted position that you currently fund and hoping to turn it into a full-time employee county position, which will then make 2 county positions in our office of 18.
And not that I don't think that's justified, but with the state so flush with cash, could we not have gotten it from them?
Yes, that request was made and was denied. In fact, we've requested 2 of our OPS positions to be transferred into full-time
Yeah.
employees as well, and those also were
And
denied.
that's the point I wanted to make, here we are, we've been talking a lot about, and I failed to talk last time, but we talked a lot about Article 5 all day. We're going to talk a little bit more about it. We saw so much flush with cash, and it really has been. I mean, we're talking about $117 billion. It was $101 billion last year, and they keep cutting more of us and what we can do, and then they keep asking us to pay.
And if you look at, and if, I could give you the information, but if you look at our salaries compared to other positions in the other state agencies, and even because DCF has privatized so many, we're making probably 2/3 of what other privately owned workers are making, or even just on the DCF side of things. So we're really working hard on a statewide level to increase to increase the salaries to be comparable to what other standards are, including to be ensure that our child advocate managers, who are the welfare professionals, to become Florida board certified, which they are now. So the last few years have been instrumental in moving towards just showing the state how valuable we are as an agency. And we continue to fight that every year.
Well, any other questions or comments from Ms. Patrick? We are here for you if you need us for anything.
Thank you very much. You've always been very helpful.
Mr. Tredis.
Can we say that, we really don't need him to come up at 22% less, except for the fact that there was a little footnote here that says, but it'll be back next year.
Good afternoon, Chairman Lockhart and Commissioner Constantine and Commissioner Herr. I am pleased to be able to request a budget that is 22% less than last year's budget, and I've been able to do that just through some, I think, efficient management of the office. I hope that next year I'll be able to continue this same budget. It's not a guarantee that I'd be asking to go back to the budget as it was before. That remains to be seen, but I'm pretty confident that that could happen. But I appreciate your support. The 22% reduction leads is a $65,694 reduction. And I'd also just like to thank you at this time for the good work that the Board of County Commissioners have done with the construction of the annex to the Seminole County Criminal Justice Center. It's being done very well, and I think it's being done in a fiscally responsible manner as well. I think it's going to be a great addition to the county. I think it's just another example of a good capital improvement by the Board of County Commissioners, so I'd like to thank you for that as well. If there are any questions, I'd be glad to try to answer them for you.
Any questions, Commissioners? Comments?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a
Thank
good
you
day.
for waiting around all day.
Right? When you get the buy sign, leave. Yes. Mr. Archer, thank you for being here today. If you would please introduce yourself and your position and your
Hi, Phil Archer, State Attorney for the 18th Circuit, Brevard and Seminole County.
Ashley Wood, Executive Director.
And thank you, and I hope I can be as brief as Mr. Tredis. We do have actually, you want to...
I'll jump in and just point out the state attorney's overall budget is approximately $28 million. Of that, Seminole County provides 1.6% from our Article 5 Technology Fund. They use that for computers, maintenance, technology supplies, and to offset the cost of one state FTE. The current budget's $461,000. It's going up by 1.2% to $467,000. Mr. Archer's here to talk a little bit about his budget.
Yeah, and just real briefly, as you can see, we have a very large overall budget. A lot of people are always surprised. We have approximately 240 plus or minus employees. Right now, 107 attorneys, usually between 112 and 115 attorneys, which makes us the largest law firm in the circuit. There's no other firm that's even close to that in Brevard or Seminole County. So it is a huge budget, huge office. As some of the other speakers have talked before, technology is the huge driver right now. It's just a huge part of what we're having to expend and operate with. Just to give you an idea, 5 or 6 years ago, hardly anybody had body cam videos. Now every agency in Seminole and most in Brevard have body cam videos. We are getting thousands of videos a day, and that's requiring quite a bit of technology for redactions, storage. We've run out of space. We've come to you before about having to buy servers. Just the thousands of videos that we're getting now. Every case has body cam video. And to the extent that we're looking at some cloud storage, I think for next year we'll be coming back to you, and it may be some upfront, higher cost upfront, but in the long term it'll actually be cheaper than trying to buy servers. We could have kept up with servers with normal, but with the body cams, so it's changing the ball game. And then you add Marcy's Law now, which causes additional redactions, and not only videos but documents. Our discovery and case management system. Under the old days, defense attorneys would have to come to the office and copy files, and we provided copy machines and paper. We've now moved to a portal link system to where defense attorneys don't have to come in anymore. They can get their discovery. That's been a huge efficiency. I know our defense bar, public defender's office, everyone appreciated that as well. Cybersecurity is increasing concern for us. We're probably next year going to have to add some staff for that. And just to give you an idea, we've got 10 FTEs on IT. Seminole County only funds 1, Brevard County funds 2. So only 3 of our 10 IT employees are funded through the counties. That's how much we're paying, and we probably need about 2 or 3 more employees, but we're obviously not including that in our budget. So our budget increase this year is a 1.2% increase. We think that's a very reasonable. We're trying to be good stewards of Seminole County money. I believe over the last 4 or 5 budgets, we've actually returned money to the county that we have not used the entire budget. We believe that's probably not going to happen in the future as we talk about some of the increases that we've talked about. But we try to be good stewards with that. And obviously, if we don't spend it all, we'll give it back. But we think it's a very modest increase, what we're requesting, and I'll open it up for questions.
Questions, comments?
No? All right.
I think you're doing an excellent job. I think we all are very pleased with what you've presented and the work that you're doing.
Well, we try to be good stewards, and we appreciate the partnerships, and I would echo what Blaise said. We love the new facilities. You guys have been wonderful. Your design team, everything's been great. So very nice to come over and work in this county.
Great. Thank you. So our next presenter is Donna Walsh from the Department of Health, and as you all know, this is going to be her last budget presentation to the board.
Don't get me started.
We're so excited for you and your upcoming endeavors, and very sad for us and for the rest of your team, but very happy for you and for the agency you're going to.
I appreciate that very much. So, but honestly, I'm not going anywhere. You'll see me. You'll see me. I'll be serving Seminole and Orange County both. And so, good afternoon, Chairman Lockhart and Commissioner Commissioner Constantine, and County Manager. Good to see you again. Yep. We just met yesterday. Gave him a tour. Appreciate you giving us this opportunity to present on our annual budget. Just to recap, and I know we spent a good while yesterday, County Manager Gray and our team just to introduce him to public health and what we're doing, the innovative things here in Seminole County. But as you all are aware, in the state of Florida, we have a unique public health system in which we're considered an integrated system. All 67 county health departments report up to the state surgeon general, who in turn reports to the governor's office. And so we're regulated by Florida statute and code 381 and 64D, all things public health. We also are accredited. We were the first state in which all 67 county health departments in the state were accredited through the Public Health Accreditation Board, and I'm happy to say that we were successfully reaccredited as well 5 years later, so yay. But that, honestly has made us better. There's 6 pillars that we are required, similar to a hospital-type system, but 6 pillars we're required to meet the criteria for to be accredited, and that's community health needs assessment, community health improvement planning, strategic planning, quality improvement, workforce development, and public health preparedness. And I'm happy to say that we, Anna Scuteri, and let me introduce, Anna Scuteri is my deputy. She's the Assistant County Health Department Director, and then Tom Kellis returned to us in Seminole here. He's our business manager, so I'm joined today by them. But Anna and I just recently attended a national conference, Public Health Preparedness Conference, in which Seminole County was the only county recognized in the state as achieving Project Public Health Ready with the new criteria, COVID criteria. I give all the credit to our team. They worked really hard on that for a couple years, even during the response, and they made it happen. So we're very proud to be part of that and recognized. So as far as our budget, we can go to the next slide here. And oops, I'm sorry, that would be me. Okay. So we have our projected budget for this year, and you'll see, in years past that we experienced a workforce reduction of about 100 staff when there was Medicaid reform, and we went down to under $10 million budget. Well, during COVID, of course, the federal dollars have come in to support our response, and you'll see a percentage there in red at the bottom that of the state federal funds, about 1.6 million attributed to the COVID response. That was about 12.46% of that particular budget category. And so we stayed steady pretty much with all of our other services there. We did see an increase in vital statistics funds coming in, and so much so that we're expanding the area because, we have acquired partners from other counties actually who prefer to come to us because of our great customer service. So that helps to bring in the revenue. In our birth certificates, we are located at multiple tax offices, tax collectors' offices, and so that's easier access for our community members, so they don't always have to come into the health department. We do have an online option as well statewide that folks can, receive their birth and death certificates. So our projections for 23-24, you see it's about $1 million down. That primarily is because of the COVID response. So we have been demobilizing during the response based on need. And these dollars are not front-funded to us. These are reimbursable dollars. So as we spend the money on staff and other response needs, then we submit those invoices to the state, who then reimburses us. So you see here about 700 and if 80,000 is attributed in that particular budget category toward the COVID response. And currently, just to kind of put things into perspective, although we had 100 less staff when COVID came, we were able to plus up very quickly 126 staff, and that's primarily because we're an academic health department. We have affiliation agreements with about 48 universities and colleges across the nation. And in good partnership, we were able to recruit those folks very quickly. But we are down to 7 staff now that are COVID funded, and by the end of June, we'll be down to 5. And of those 5, 3 are registered nurses that are in a pool. So they only are called upon when we need them. If we have a surge, they're going to help us probably with back to school. And some of these nurses are in fact, probably most of them are school board nurses that work OPS with us over time. So that's how we've been able to plus up when we have a need as well. Currently, as I mentioned, the other 2 that we should have by the end of June, these are 2 epidemiologists. and they will continue to provide healthcare-acquired infection services. We were beneficiaries of a healthcare-acquired infection position that we will receive in June. When the state plussed up because of the incidence of COVID in our long-term care facilities and outbreaks, the state has found funding through federal support to continue this effort for several years to come. We just got word that I believe that these funds will be available through 2027 now. We thought through 2025, but that's going to be extended because we identified a great need during COVID, a pre-existing condition, if you will, that a lot of our long-term care facilities, nursing homes, group homes and such, they need some help with infection control. And if we can get them there, then we can prevent something like what occurred during COVID from happening. So that's a plus for us too. So we're down to about 5 COVID funded. Another change that has happened with the COVID funding as we demobilized is we had acquired 2 warehouses to store everything. We've consolidated. We are transitioning out of those 2 warehouses back to our 2 primary warehouses, one that's public health preparedness funded, and the other one is a warehouse we've had for years that's built into our budget. We're also keeping the space reflections the county used to occupy. So that was in our transition plan, was our COVID team. And now we're moving our infectious disease team over there with them for STD. And so we have about 25 staff. They'll be staged there. So we're consolidating and definitely reducing our footprint when it comes to COVID response dollars. Next one here. You can see with our payer mix here, our revenue mix, I should say, if you look at the state categorical GR, non-categorical GR, and state federal funds, that makes up about 67% of our budget. And so most of our dollars do come from the state. As far as our local contributions, our core contract has maintained pretty constant ever since I've been here for 12 years. The county supports us at a core contract of about $808,000, $807 and change, 7% of our budget. In that local grants and contracts category, that's where the county also additionally supports us with some of our community services, and I'll go into that in a little bit later. We are asking for a reduction in funds in that category and of about $81,000, so you'll see the reduction there, and looking for other funding sources and transitioning some of our positive youth development curriculum. So you also see here vital statistics, I said, are about 4%, environmental health fees about 6%. Our client fees make up about 3% of our budget. We're not in the business of earning money off of our clients because most of our clients are uninsured or underinsured, and we never turn anyone away for inability to pay. We work with folks. Other insurance and Medicaid is there as well. So side by side for the last 3 years, we've stayed pretty steady with our budget. Again, this is it looks a bit inflated because of the federal dollars that supported our budget during the COVID response. We're really coming down in 23-24 to where we will normally average between 10 and 11 million. And we're staying with our cash balance between 3 and 10%. So we're mandated by Florida statute for a large county health department to stay within 3 to 10% in our cash balance. So we have a healthy cash balance. These are the different programs that the county supports. As you all are aware, I think I've reported this in years past too. In your package, you'll see a new community health needs assessment. It's a book in the back there. In partnership with our nonprofit hospital systems that service 4 counties, Lake, Osceola, Orange, and Seminole, that's Advent Health and Orlando Health. We partner, and this is our 3rd cycle, in which we conduct a community health needs assessment. This is a roadmap to what the needs are and priorities are in our community as it relates to health and wellness. And so we just completed that this past year. Aspire is part of this, as well as the federally qualified healthcare centers in each of those 4 counties. And our priority areas have maintained pretty much the same. The substance use disorders, mental health, We also, are concerned about physical activity and chronic disease and the socioeconomic factors that affect health. So we'll be working on those through our Healthy Seminole Collaborative that meets quarterly, and then our work groups meet monthly in each of those priority areas to develop goals, strategies, objectives, and activities, and report out to the main group. We invite over 200 community members, residents, as well as different agencies to those meetings to discuss what we can do forward. Let's see what the next here. Some of the programming, what we've identified is, and this is, we have our core, as you saw with the categorical, non-categorical, and federally funded programs. We have our core public health programs, such as family planning, STD, HIV/AIDS, TB, refugee health, epidemiology, environmental health. We also, though, through these community health needs assessments, identify further needs that aren't traditionally funded by the state. And so we seek out grants and other funding sources to assist us to provide these services. We don't duplicate services. We coordinate our services with other partner agencies, and we make sure that there's never enough resources to go around to duplicate. So we make sure that we're not doing the same thing, but actually coordinating. So the diabetes prevention education has assisted us, and I'll be showing you a slide in return here on some of the activities. The school dental sealant services last year, we expanded to 5th grade, so we provide this service in 1st and 5th. Our mobile health services, the county has consistently supported us. We have 15 sites that we visit routinely monthly, and then we have additional outreach. To date, this fiscal year, at least 54 outreach events in addition to those routine visits with our mobile services. And we just added a visit to Teen Challenge, in which we're providing physicals and their entry health with a mobile unit that was funded by the county COVID dollars. So we're expanding the use of the mobile unit now, redirecting to services in the community. And then our teenage outreach program, this is the one that we're transitioning. There's opportunity that the state has provided recently for a human trafficking special project. And so our school health manager has submitted a proposal through the Positive Youth Development curriculum in order to administer this and raise awareness to youth about human trafficking. And then we have our community nutrition program that the county supports. You can see here side by side the different grants that we have been in receipt of, and then what we're projecting next year. We have applied for about 4 or 5 different grants this fiscal year, and unfortunately we didn't receive those, but we don't give up. Our team consistently looks for grant opportunities to support funding. The hospital community benefits programs have been fabulous to us. We've been very grateful for the startup money that they have given us over the years, but it's really intended to be startup, and so we have to find a sustainable model to continue our programming. So our ask is, like I mentioned, 81,000 less of community services through the county this coming fiscal year. This is just a glimpse. Now, our services, just like businesses and other healthcare services during the COVID response, went down as people did not get out as much. We are starting to see an increase in services again, so this is helpful. And then also with the school, they transitioned to an opt-in versus an opt-out model, and so I know our school health managers working very closely with Seminole County Public Schools to remind parents of those consent forms that are available to them before school starts through Skyward and through other means. It's probably likely that the parents aren't even seeing the consent forms, so we're working with them. And then our Women, Infants, Children program, the federal government still is recommending virtual visits, but we have a blend, of virtual as well as in-person visits. So we're starting to see an increase in services come up again from when we were in COVID. And this is, something that the WIC program is experiencing nationwide. We're hearing from our colleagues, not only across the state, but throughout the nation. Environmental health, this is one of those areas, as well as WIC, hard to fill positions. So we do have contract services for our septic program. We are coming up on year 3 with the transition to DEP. From everything I'm hearing from County Health Systems in Tallahassee, that agreement is, they plan to move forward at the end of 5 years to transition completely to DEP, but in the meantime, they have contracted back with local health departments to provide the service. And so it's very difficult to recruit people who know that they're going to not have a job with us in a couple years. The idea is to transition them to DEP, but they, of course, would be able to select who they want to transition. And so we've transitioned to contract services. So we pay more money for those services, about 2 to 3 times more, but we have to continue to provide the service to the community. So we're working through those issues and concerns. And then you'll see here that some of our service numbers have gone down. We did have 2 hurricanes during this period of time, and thanks to our environmental health team and the portable EPA labs, the mobile EPA labs, we were able to test over 600 well samples. So you'll see here 640 samples were taken, and we even asked for environmental health strike teams, other health departments, to send folks to help us, help our small team. We're small but mighty. We just have a few. We just recently hired a supervisor, like last week, and so we're very, very happy. This individual actually was in incident command. He has a master's and a bachelor's in the sciences, but he was in California managing the wildfires. So he has experience on a broad scale on some of the crises that we might encounter locally here. And then we currently have 2 vacancies in our environmental health program that we're actively recruiting for. Here you'll also see our mobile health services. The blue line is 2122, the orange line 2223, so numbers have gone up. We have also lost some staff members in this small team, but we've also acquired some. So we try to keep steady and make sure that we continue to provide the services. It's a team effort for sure. And this is the structure. Anna Scuteri oversees the Community Integrated Mobile Health Service team under the Office of Health Promotion and Education and a manager there. But you'll see that under the mobile services, you have our outreach pediatric asthma, which is home visitation program, and that's funded by the state right now. Then the diabetes prevention and management, we have 2 individuals working part-time for that, and fall prevention, which is another state-funded program currently. Social services, overdose prevention, we work very closely with the Sheriff's Office. We have a federal grant that is going to expire at the end of June that we've been able to use to work closely with the SCORE team, the Seminole County Sheriff's Office and SCORE team, to address the opioid and other substance use disorders in our community. We also have our Healthy Communities, Closing the Gap grant, and Community Nutrition Initiative and Community Outreach. And I'll go into more detail here coming up. So, there we go. Okay. So, as I mentioned, some of the routine visits, 15 locations, include Rescue Outreach Mission, Picnic Project, Iglesia Nueva Vida, Uptown Inn and Suites, previously known as Remington Inn, Shepherd's Hope, Midway Safe Harbor, Community Church of God in Geneva, Iglesia El Retender in Oviedo, Winter Springs, Bueno Pharmacy, Prep Mobile Event, One Senior Place, Chiliota Grocery, Pathways to Care, Open Your Heart to Hope, Food Pantry in Georgetown, senior apartments. So we make our routine visits to them. And then you'll see here the different places. It's our underserved communities is where we focus most of our attention, folks who may have transportation issues and inability to reach us for services. So our medical screenings, over 13,000 were provided to community individuals. So we provide multiple screenings for one individual, of course. And just a summary, and these are in your packets, so I won't go over each one in detail. I know you guys can review that, but certainly if you have questions about any of these. And then reaching our seniors and fall prevention, I'll go over some of the successes there. We were actually invited to participate in a pilot with the National Association of County and City Health Officials on a technical assistance plan evaluation plan for fall, the adult fall prevention program on a national level. And so the result of that, it was a very comprehensive report. An evaluation tool was developed. Anna was very instrumental in that, and her team. And we're now recognized nationally for the work that we do in fall prevention. So. Just, again, a glimpse of how many clients served and to give you an idea. And then our nutrition services, now this is something that the county supports. This was previously supported by a federal grant, and now it has gone to Second Harvest Food Bank. It's a DCF grant. But we had done such great work in the schools and young children, as well as our adult program, that Heather continues her work in the school systems with youth. And you'll see here a report on the services, the various services that she's provided within that program. And then our diabetes prevention as well as diabetes self-management. So those that are borderline diabetic and at risk for developing diabetes, and then those who are diagnosed diabetes and how we can help them manage their care in home. This is, helpful because, many of our clients, many of our residents turn to the hospitals when they're in crisis, and we're trying to prevent that from occurring. And we've had some success, no doubt. Then our food pantry, so we do have a partnership with the Sharing Center. We are a host site for the food pantry on Wednesdays, 4 to 5:30. We service about 40 to 50 folks every week, and we also provide wraparound services. So we make them aware of the other services available at the health department, as well as do some diabetes screening when they come in. We also provide free backpacks, basically because many folks come to us on foot, bike, or bus, and it's difficult to carry a bag or a box, So we ask them, like Publix, please bring your backpack back next week, and we'll fill it up again. And so we do try to provide as many wraparound services as possible. And speaking of wraparound services, we have co-located a number of services within the health department. As you all are aware, True Health, our federally qualified health care centers, co-located with us at the Airport Boulevard site. We also just invited in Recovery Connections. The county supports them, so they just started services on Thursdays with us. We also have the Victim Service Center co-located with us daily, Miracle Love for our HIV/AIDS clients. I know I'm missing Veterans Center, the VA Center. They're coming back in June to provide services at the health department. So we really attempt to co-locate as many services as possible, understanding that people have difficulty getting to places. Whoops. Did I go backwards? No. Oh, this is just, again, just some more data regarding our food pantry, how many folks that we have seen, and then the nutrition and physical education activities. And I didn't know that we put in these different bells and whistles on the slideshow, so I'm sorry. So this is our federal grant that we've had for a couple years now, that we got to address our opioid crisis and other substance use disorders within the county. We work very closely with the SCORE team. In the next slide you see here, and I'm pretty certain that the Sheriff's Office shared with you the gravity of this in our county as well as across the state and nation. We also were at the RX Summit, and it's just incredible what we're seeing nationwide. It's just unbelievable. So it's a team effort, and it takes all of us to address this. And so I'm going to just go through that. We did receive 122 referrals to our program, and what occurs is part of our community paramedicine program, mobile health services. So as we receive these referrals, we make home visits and follow up and reinforce the services available to that individual and family. Sometimes folks are not ready the first visit to accept help, and so we go out and reinforce. And we do case management. We meet regularly with the City of Oviedo, City of Sanford, and the county community paramedicine programs, as well as with the SCORE team to do case management on any referrals we might receive. And that's just our outreach there. And then I have a picture show coming up here. But just to highlight a few other things, Anna, again, she's a world traveler. She was just at the National Network of Public Health Institutes last week, where we were also recognized. We were invited to participate in an Innovation Hub cohort, first of its kind. So, and we were recognized at that particular, we presented. What's it?
Okay. Commissioner Constantine, I think, had a question. He was kind of trying to get my attention.
Oh,
my. If it was
okay.
in reference to the prior slide.
Do you want me to go back?
I want you to move on.
It's the whole thing. Donna, when I was informed that you were leaving, I was very disappointed. I'm happy for you. But I recall when you first got the job and what a turmoil the department was in. And I just wanted to thank you personally. You can go through all this, I mean, all of us have been to many of these things.
I know you have.
We really, we just
appreciate
appreciate all the hard work and effort that you and your staff have done.
Thank you.
During the COVID pandemic and all the way through everything. You've just been a real joy to work with, and I mean that sincerely.
Thank you.
And I did have one question, though.
Sure,
In your
sure.
pantry,
Yes.
I noticed something that was counterintuitive.
Okay, what's
Probably it's not, because if you think about it, but people that, that have nutrition, concerns. You did a BMI, and of the 41 that you tested, 29 were obese.
Yes.
It just was probably because of the lack of good quality nourishment is what it was, but it just seemed counterproductive. They didn't have food.
Right.
But 29 of the 41 were obese.
Well, it's a great observation, but
It's the quality.
No, that's what I said. It's the quality of the food, but it was just counterintuitive, when you look at it.
Well, and
the numbers.
I will give credit to our staff, too. We had, when I first arrived in Seminole County, we had a couple of master in public health students. And Gigi Rivadeneira, our school health manager, worked with them on a project to create a cookbook of healthy recipes for foods you acquire from food pantries, which we shared with Second Harvest Food Bank. And they have since developed a cookbook as well. So we try to promote healthy options. Now, of course, in food pantries, you don't always get that. But we're very active in the Health and Hunger Task Force, which Second Harvest Food Bank started across Central Florida. And they have been involved in multiple projects with the doctors giving out prescriptions for what folks should select in food pantries if they have diabetes, if they have heart disease. And oftentimes the folks who need our services in the food pantry are ones who have the chronic health conditions to begin with. And so we bring them in because we want to introduce them to the other services and how we can help them with their chronic conditions. And we have had many success stories. So it's a great observation, but we are addressing
I can
that.
understand it, but at the same time, it seemed, counterproductive.
Right.
Counterintuitive.
Any questions for?
I just have a thought, and that is that we have this mobile unit. Donna and I have been
Yes.
talking about this for a different organization. But the mobile unit, if staffed with a local provider who can bill through the system, can come and do on-site annual physicals for our employees.
Yes, they could. It's a 3-compartment unit, a full clinic in one of the units, and then, of course, a workspace, and then the other one, you can put portable dental equipment in there. You can put, we usually do immunizations in that particular compartment. So it's fully operational, and we want to get it more functional out there. Yeah. Just a couple of other things that have come our way with the legislative session ending is, as you probably heard, that was proposed and was approved. I don't know if the governor actually signed yet, but a salary increase for COLA, for cost of living for state employees of 5% for Department of Health. We don't know yet how that's going to be budgeted. So, last year when this came about, part of it did come from our cash balance. So, we're hopeful that they will.
Getting an increase. You're paying for it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes. That's right. That's usually how it goes. But we're hopeful that maybe. And then there was also some dollars that came down, some federal dollars to support our school system. So in December, they asked us to put together a proposal, and we just learned that the funding is available through 2024, June 2024, and we were able to propose 34 licensed and 65 unlicensed staff for Seminole County Public Schools. They've already hired several, and so we're working with them to get more nurses and unlicensed staff to support them. And then the state also entered into, and this has been a conversation for many years, since the 36 years I've been in the state agencies, but GR reallocation based on population size. The matrix is outdated, And they did hire a company called Mercer to do the study. They did get input from local health officers across the state, and they have come up with their final report, and it does appear that there may be a GR reallocation sometime this fall. We don't know what that looks like for Seminole County, but we believe it'll probably be more dollars coming to us because obviously our population has increased over the last 20 years or so. So we're hopeful that that will bring more revenue into the community that we can then, continue to provide these services and more.
Thank you. We appreciate you very much. We appreciate your team, the partnership. If there are any other questions or comments from... Thank you
all
so much, Donna.
And it really has been a true pleasure working in Seminole County. I'm going to still work in Seminole County, just with a different hat.
Different hat, that's exactly right.
I'll still be seeing you.
Yes, you will.
Well, before we adjourn for the day, let's just talk about next steps. If you would, maybe Mr. Gray, I know there's been some discussion about maybe adding some additional time on the 20th.
Of course. Yes, and so we have taken scrupulous notes, so with a team, we'll go back and meet and follow up and provide you with the information that you all have discussed today, additional information. One of the things I do want to ask the board, most likely, we're going to need another day for work sessions. Right now, it's planned for June the 20th. But there are some follow-up items that we'll need to put on there. We'll have all the departments, of course, present, but I know we're going to be talking about the sales tax discussion, the Article 5 discussion. We have all the capital projects lists that we've requested, that what's out there, what we're committed to, so we're working on that too. So most likely, we'll be working with your offices to set up a separate day. So we're going to talk about that internally. And then I'll bring a couple options for you all to look at. June, we may even push it to July, but I know a lot of folks, are traveling, so we'll do that in June. But we'll be following back up with you. Did I miss anything, Tim or Lori?
And Madam Chair, the only thing I would say is that if you needed, whatever length of time you needed on the 20th, if we wanted to extend that day, I would be fine with that too.
We'll try to stick with the June, because I know that's already on your calendars, and we'll see if we can do
Because
that.
we have to have the tax collector that day too, don't we?
Oh, that's right. Yes, invite him.
So that evening is the Seminole County Public Schools Board meeting, which I may or may not have to attend for the record category.
I think just as a follow-up for clarification on some of the conversation we had earlier about requests for additional information from the constitutionals, I think it's, from my perspective, and certainly, Mr. Gray,
Sure.
follow up with my colleagues as appropriate, but I would like our asks of each of the constitutionals to be consistent.
Yep.
I think if we're asking for budget detail from one, we need to ask for budget detail from all, understanding that there is, some
Things
stuff
that-
with the sheriff that, might be,
Right.
Sensitive. I feel like we have had great working relationships with our constitutional officers, and we have come a really long way in working with each of them. And this additional information just it helps to further solidify that we're all working together and making really good decisions together, because as was pointed out earlier, the pot is not getting that much bigger, and our portion of it to fund all of the other county services is getting much smaller. So we have fiduciary responsibilities, not just on the behalf of the citizens, but on the parts of the functions of county government that are our responsibility to see through. So with that in mind, I had already asked Tim if he could kind of do that, but I know I just wanted to make sure everybody was on the same page with the ask.
Yeah.
Are we good with that, Commissioner Constantine?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, and to take that one step further, we ought to be prepping for next year now with, this is the ask now and the expectation for future submissions, and this is the format. And you can wrap all sorts of presentation around it, but
Right.
this is the format.
I like that. What I told the staff, and they look at me sometimes cross-eyed probably, I was like, let's go through this year how you normally do it, and then let's tweak it a little bit next year, with even next year having the constitutionals and the departments and what we have talked about, everyone together over a couple days, so you get to see the full picture of how the county budget is, both on the revenue and expenditure side. So we will do that. So then that's my plan for when we come back in June, is that we'll go through all the departments. We will go through a couple different follow-up items that you all wanted. We'll recap the constitutional, so you see that. And so at the end, you'll see the overall picture and what our recommendation and what any of your recommendations are. How do we move forward with the adopted budget?
Sounds great. Commissioner Hur.
I think one addition to that is that when we kick off with David Johnson coming and talking about the increase to revenue for the property taxes, to, I think Commissioner Constantine and I batted this point back and forth a couple of times today, that sort of sets a bar. Other revenue sources to this organization may not be increasing to that degree. There may be other sources that are actually decreasing. That bar needs to be calibrated from the very beginning. And as we can see, even if we're setting the bar, it seems to be an irrelevant number, which is super scary. I get that it can be irrelevant, particularly for the smaller organizations, because there's more volatility to it. But it can't be irrelevant year after year after year after year. And that's, I think, the challenge that we have to, that's the elephant in the room. That's why this is all a little bit uncomfortable.
Right.
You know, and just to say that the ad valorem comes to about, 76%, something like that, or between 70 and 76%. And what happens is that they see the 10%, and then everybody thinks
They got 10%.
10%, when really the other budget items, revenue items, are not going up. In fact, some of them are going down. So, yes.
Just one last thing, not to belabor it, but one of the things that we have all, I just speak to my financial team, that we talked about, maybe even kicking off the year in January with an economic forecast, because we know a lot of the revenue projections at that time, the state's already doing them, we're looking at them too. We work with the board. We set some budget guidelines, not only to our departments, but to all the constitutionals based on information, based on that economic forecast. So that, like to your point, that everyone is on that level playing field and they know what's expected as we come into the work sessions. And that we're consistent with all of the data that they're providing for you all. So we're going to be working on all that as well. So stay tuned.
All right, sounds great. Any other, any members of the public that are here to speak? I don't see anyone,
They've all gone.
but yes, we outlasted them. So we'll let the record reflect that there were no members of the public wishing to speak, and we'll adjourn at 5:12.